open to anyone, all around the world.
Oh!
The Chess.com Global Championship offers the dream of playing against the best.
We are in for a wild ride.
And hey, have we mentioned there's also $1 million at stake?
The total pot is $1 million.
No, that is not a typo. The prizes are unbelievably generous.
The CGC knockout phase has hit crunch time. We began with thousands of players, now only a handful remain.
131 moves is what it took for Wesley So to make it to Toronto on an unbelievable defensive effort, Aman.
No matter who you are, things are about to get very, very real.
It's a huge collapse from Caruana.
It all went downhill. And Dmitry Andreikin punches his ticket to the round of 8 in unreal fashion.
At stake, a trip to the finals in Toronto and a clean shot at the largest first place prize of the year.
E6 was winning!
My friends, it's the CGC round of 16. Who's headed to Toronto? It's time to find out.
Welcome back, everybody, to the 2022 Chess.com Global Championship presented by Brave. I'm Grandmaster Robert Hess. Alongside me, my good friend, Grandmaster Aman Hamilton. Aman, great to see you, buddy, and it's going to be another exciting set of matches.
Hey, Robert. What's up to everyone watching around the world? Yeah, this is going to be such an exciting day of chess. The matches, I mean, there's so much at stake, Robert, as we whittle down towards that final 8 that go to Toronto. You just know that the pressure is mounting for everybody involved.
For sure. And as we try to find out who our 8 contestants will be in Toronto, we want to give a quick shout out to Brave, who will be our presenting sponsor all the way through the live finals in Toronto. So thank you very much. But we do want to remind everybody of 2 players who already have made their way through thanks to Sunday's box score. And they were in the All-American Derby. This looked like the U.S. Championship over there, Aman.
I know, exactly. These matches were ones that I also had the pleasure of calling as well. So pretty exciting. Levon kind of dispatched of Sam Sevian, but I feel like that score didn't really represent what went on in that match. And then, of course, what a thriller in Wesley and Jeffrey. It was just punches back and forth, and it was Wesley who landed the final blow.
Yeah, you had a fun day on Sunday because that Armageddon match, it felt like Jeffrey was just about to make his way through, but the superstar, the world top 10 player, he escaped and makes his way to Toronto at the start of next month. But on Monday's action, I had the call with Levy for that. Hikaru Nakamura, no real surprise there, I guess you could say. But how about in the other match in Group D?
Yeah, Fabiano Caruana, Dmitry Andreikin. I think a lot of people did not expect this result, but I have to say, Robert, I'm not surprised at the final result. Now, the way that we got there, that's a different story. Those games could easily have gone Fabiano's way, but Dmitry Andreikin is such a top player and such a contender in this rapid format that I really think he could go all the way.
Yeah, he showed what resilience and sturdy defense will do for you, and he is... Well, people on this side of the bracket, they would like to join Dmitry Andreikin. Hikaru Nakamura, the number 1 overall seed. Again, no surprise. He's made his way through. But Aman, we still have 4 spots in the round of 8 available. And as we look at the bracket from top to bottom, Jan Krzysztof Duda, Alexis Sarana, they're trying to face Hikaru Nakamura. And Anish Giri and Pavel Pankratov, the winner of this match, they won't know who they will face until next week.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Nakamura solidified his spot with a nice win over Dominguez. Fairly solid match from him as well. I think he's actually picked up his level as the tournament has gone on. That's the way I feel. So, of course, Duda and Sarana fighting for a spot to play him. But, imagine you've got this match in front of you, such a tough one, and then it's like, hey, congratulations, here's Hikaru Nakamura.
Yeah, for sure. Well, they would get minimum an extra $10,000 from winning this match as it separates the top 8 finish versus the round of 16 conclusion. But we have 2 exciting matchups today. Really good stuff. And it comes with players who are a bit of a surprise. We have some Cinderella stories, Mon.
Yeah, I think today is going to be so exciting for a number of reasons, Robert. First of all, we have a couple players that are what I like to call the bracket busters. These guys are still in the tournament. Everyone loves that underdog story. And Pankratov and Sarana, they are exactly that. 2 extremely strong players that I just love the format of this entire event is giving them the platform to shine.
Oh, for sure. And Alexei Sarana, he's a known player to most of the chess community these days, thanks to his success in the many online events. And we'll see him take on Jan Krzysztof Duda today. So these two, they don't have a huge history, as we can see on the graphic here. Duda has won their only meetup at the World Rapid Championship. So unfamiliar foes.
Yeah, and it's actually a little bit odd considering like these are two extremely strong players and extremely young players. And just somehow the way it's played out in the chess world, they just haven't encountered each other in tournaments, over the board, even that much online. So people are kind of gathered here to watch a little bit of history. Not much between these guys before. So a lot of question marks on top of this match, Robert. So really excited to see how these players match up because I think we've seen Duda in the spotlight a little bit more, but in terms of the online success, Sarana has just been killing it lately.
Yeah, he really has. I mean, the guy just feels like he's always a contender for Title Tuesdays. Obviously, in this tournament itself, he just eliminated Shakhriyar Mamedyarov with an immortal. That game was a sight to behold. And so I think that he'll hold nothing back. And I don't even know how big of a favorite JKD is. But before we dive into the numbers on that match, let's go to the other one today, the one that will start our day off between Anish Giri and Pavel Pankratov. These two also have not played, but that's a little bit less surprising.
Indeed, yeah. Anish Giri, needs no introduction. One of the top players in the world for a very long time as well. And Pavel Pankratov, he's just that guy that won't go away in this tournament. And for such a good reason. He's so strong, and he's demonstrated that over the course of this knockout event. I think you have to have really good nerves, and you just have to have that tenacity in these events, the strong mentality, because he's been in positions where he could have been knocked out. He's been in positions where he's up against some of the strongest players in the world, but he's always found a way to come back, and he's progressed in this bracket. Talk about a top player in the world. Well, he's got another one in Anish Giri, so he is going to have his work cut out for him today and for the rest of the tournament if his run continues.
And I think it's the best thing about the CGC. It gives the spotlight to a player like Pankratov, who may not be known around the world, but he did beat Vishwanathan Anand and Nordibek Abdusattorov in back-to-back matches. So we'll see if he can make his way through to Toronto. But Aman, the predictions going into this event, people who filled out their brackets, these are unexpected matchups.
They are, and I'm just going to go ahead and give a shout-out to anybody who predicted these matchups, because there's not that many of you, and I think a small pat on the back is in order. First of all, to even predict that these matchups would happen. And then the other interesting thing, Robert, for me is I'm looking at the matchups. And first of all, Pavel Pankratov, Alexei Sarana, of course, they're underdogs. But I'm actually, kind of impressed and interested in the fact that of the people who predicted these matchups to happen, it feels like we do have some, staunch believers in the underdogs overall.
Yeah, 24 people have Pavel Pankratov in their top 8. That is very surprising, given the gauntlet he's gone through. He beat Vishy. He beat Nordibek Abdusattorov, the reigning world rapid champion. And then he has to beat Anish Giri along the way. I'm with him on. It's just shocking to see that. And I'm less surprised by the Sarana stands out there, because Sarana has made a name for himself. But still, 152 people saw Alexei beating Vidit, beating Mamedyarov, and then taking down Duda.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible to see that all the way, the belief in that player. So that's why these matches are so exciting. And obviously, I'm interested to see, is the community going to continue to be right? The 24 faithful for Pavel Pankratov here. We'll wait and see.
Well, Pankratov will have to defeat Anish Giri, and he's going to have to do so in a 4-game match. Just a reminder to all the folks out there who are watching that this is a best of 4. 2.5 points wins in regulation, but if it's a 2-2 tie in the 15-minute plus 2-second increment time control, we get to Armageddon with bidding. So, Aman, we've seen many great matchups thus far, but Pavel Pankratov, he's kind of the king of Armageddon.
Yeah, and I think that sort of speaks to the tenacity and just the mentality you need to have for these knockout matches. He always seems so calm, so he's nerveless. I just get that feeling when I watch him play that he's not concerned. He'll play white, he'll play black. It doesn't matter in the Armageddon. There's a job to do, and I think he evaluates his chances pretty high if he can take the match to an Armageddon game. And as the underdog, I think that's a very viable strategy.
Yes, no, it certainly is. And we see him in his vintage pose with the sun shining down on him. He needs all the help he can get. And look at him. He's rocking his head a little bit there. He's
Yep.
vibing. And Anish, on the other hand, he's just getting in that chess player mentality, concentrating, trying to figure out what openings he's going to employ. So
Yep.
I'm really looking forward to this match.
Indeed, and everybody probably does know and might need a reminder that Anish Giri, one of the best theoreticians and opening specialists in the entire world in chess right now. So it'll be very interesting from my perspective to see the openings to these games. I'm wondering is Anish going to come out flying with a lot of theory, a lot of preparation, maybe a lot of speed early on, because that's what we kind of know Anish to do, is that he puts you under pressure in areas where he excels. And because he's such an opening specialist, I feel like he'll be looking to get quick moves out in the opening, test Pankratov, see if he can keep up theory-wise, and maybe get an edge on the clock.
Yeah, and Anish Giri played the best match of anybody. And that's a big accolade considering how many good matches there have been. But he destroyed Raunak Sedwani. That was not even close to a true match. I think he made Raunak look hundreds of rating points worse than he truly is. So, Anish is showing that he cares, that he's ready to play anybody, and he's not taking his status for granted.
That's right. And, Pavel, I think he's just got that fearless mentality. He doesn't care what's going to be thrown at him. He's been up against some titans in this tournament already. What's another one to him, So I think he's been in this situation before. He knows how to handle it. And it's just going to come down to, the nerves and the preparation on game day here, as it looks like we've got the players here and we'll probably be set to start any second now.
Yeah, the games are going to get underway very shortly. The players are here on screen, and there we are off. We see a French defense. I didn't even have time to complain and say how
Exactly.
I can't believe it, but the players are off here. And Pavel Pankratov, he showed that he would be happy to play the French against Vichy. So why change against Anish Giri?
And I like that approach. I think, especially when you are the underdog, you probably don't want to change too much. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And, if you're going up against Anish Giri, I think you're better off playing what what you've studied, and what's worked for you, rather than trying to say, oh, he'll prepare for me, let me try to mix it up. No, I think you stick with what you know and you test it out.
What an interesting move. Rook to b8 there. So this position already is extraordinarily rare, but I don't quite understand rook b8, as you don't have b5 defended. There are two of white's pieces covering the square. So it feels a little bit slow, and that's why the evaluation bar has gone up to +1. That move was not appreciated.
Yeah, and I think that move, I feel like I've seen it before. It's almost like a catcher, like a pre-move catcher. If you play bishop d3, then I think black goes pawn to c4, pawn to b5. It kind of gets a really quick momentum on the queen side going. But it almost looks like Anish, so familiar with this idea, that he quickly took on c5, did not let that happen. And then you're right, the rook b8 move just kind of looks a little funny now.
Yeah, it's like white got a very useful move, a3, to play b4 next, and black's move was rook b8, which doesn't look like where the rook wants to be. In fact, if you play a5, the rook would prefer to be on a8. So I think an opening win in terms of the early stage battle for Anish Giri. And now it's about this bishop, and that's why I don't like the French. This bishop is blocked in by its own pieces. This knight can go to b5 at any moment, not just to go to d6, but also sometimes you go to d4. And oh my gosh, Aman, there looks like there are about to be problems on the light squares for black.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, this isn't exactly an advertisement for the French right now. The bishop on c8 looks about as bad as a bishop could look in the French. And the move f6, while it is absolutely a thematic move, when you couple it with the move rook b8 and the fact that black isn't castled, you just get this feeling that black's trying to do too much too early. And oftentimes you need to be castled, or you need that extra tempo before you break the center open.
And I'm shocked that Pankratov is playing this quickly. He's only spent 30 seconds, and of course a little bit more with the increment. But to make a move like f6, it is thematic. Aman, you've been a French player. You know that, of course, this is standard fare. But this early with the king in the center, as you're mentioning, I think Anish can simply castle, because there's no way black has taken on e5 thus yet. You're going to have to castle yourself. And I just feel like white's attack will be quite strong.
Yeah, and if black ever needs to admit that white's attack is too strong and play the move f5, that's a
Ugh.
bad sign for black. So now that he's played f6, I feel like he is kind of committed to this f takes e5 move at some point. So things probably will open up, and I think you're right about that pressure on the king side. As soon as white castles, there's going to be takes on h7 stuff, the knight swinging to g5, and hang on, don't forget about the queen side, Robert. Knight to b5 wants to go to either d4 or the d6 square.
Yeah, this e6 pawn will be tender in many positions. So black lacks space. I think the good news for Pankratov is he has clear pressure in the center. And Anish, he's playing e4 today, right? A lot of times he plays d4. So he chose his opening. He wanted to get in the French. But now that he's here, familiarity often is the way that you secure results versus just good positions.
And interestingly, I thought that Giri would be the one, coming in, flying in the opening, looking for that time advantage. But it's kind of the opposite at the moment, not necessarily in a good way. Oftentimes when you see like a very top player diving into an opening think, well, either he's never seen it before and he's in trouble, and it's, so you're coming out with some prep, or, the dreaded, something doesn't feel right here. And I feel like Anish is in that one right now where something feels off and he has castled. That pawn on e5, Robert, is not for the taking.
No, that's why Pavel quickly castles himself. And the other game is getting underway, so we'll leave this French for now and go over to the Polish versus Russian battle. And we have a Sicilian. And are we going to get a Najdorf? Because that would make us both very happy.
Yeah, that would be a really fun one. And wow, g3. Robert, I have this thing with g3 in the Sicilian, and it's just one of those moves that you can play in every single Sicilian. There's not a Sicilian where you can't play it, and it's always going to be, reasonable. It's never going to be a mistake. This is one of those ways to get an opening system that's not too theoretical and just play chess.
I shook my head a little bit, though, because we do prefer our pawns going to g4 and up the board for an attack. But the way Jan Shistov is handling this is positionally. The d5 square is almost always a problem in the Najdorf because of where black's pawns are. You'd like to get a pawn to c6. But I'm never going to capture a piece there. And with bishop g2, the knight, the pawn, the queen, the bishop, all covering d5, you're going to be saddled with this backward pawn d6 for pretty much the remainder of the game.
That's right. Yeah, it's a ongoing battle for that d5 square. Like, who can control it? Who has more control of the position? And such an interesting move, bishop to g5, that we saw earlier from Duda, because it seems to me like the move h6, Robert, isn't that kind of useful for black to have in?
It's useful, but it also is a hook. So if Serrano had any ideas of castling, then I'm going to play g4. And when I play g5, I can break open the king side. Whereas if that pawn can go back to h7, a pawn on g5 doesn't really threaten all that much. So it's one of those pros and cons situation where Duda clearly has studied the position, and he's enjoying the fact that pawn's on h6. But that's why Serrano plays on the other side of the board with b6.
Yeah, the bishop, it's far different from that French bishop we saw in the other game, Robert. Bishop on c8 actually has some prospects here. We'll be heading to the b7 square, where obviously white is looking to match that with bishop to g2, probably kingside castling. And, due to the pawn on a4, the pawn on e4 in white's position, he's really trying to clamp the moves b5 and d5. So I think if we see b5 or d5 successfully from black, then it's probably going to be a good position for him.
Absolutely. Usually if you get those pawn breaks in, you're a very happy camper. And one other thing to note is this knight could venture out to c5 at some moment. Black has put pawns on squares that protect it, and that could give black a little bit more space, because for now, white has more control over this board. But Serrano playing quickly, he is one of the best opening theoreticians in the world. And he is not going to be afraid of Jan Krzysztof Duda just because he played in the candidates tournament and has won events like the Superbet Poland Rapid and Blitz.
Yeah, it's like he's not going to be scared of him because of, well, here's 10 reasons to be scared of him.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that JKD has had some great successes to his name, but Serrano fears nobody. And look at this setup, Aman. All of white's pieces close together, compact structure. Give me the d5 control and freeze that rook on a8, because if you play a very natural move like rook c8, you simply blunder a pawn.
Yeah, and this idea of playing pawn to g3, and then not putting the bishop there is something, the teacher would have the ruler out ready to scold every chess student here, because, that's not advised. Not only does it look like a waste of a move, g3, but also it weakens the light squares, and the bishop on b7 is now aimed right at that rook on h1. And if white castles, it's just going to be pointed on the best diagonal. But you're right, this is all about that d5 square. And if white could, just play knight into d5, and we trade every piece on that square, get rid of the bishops as well, I think that's kind of a dream scenario for Duda in this position.
Yeah, for all the people who want to know how to take down a knight, or if you leave black with this bishop on e7 and you're left with a knight that's on d5. So if all these trades can happen, you're thrilled. But that's why Serrano played an early h6. He wants to keep his knight. He is not going to allow this bishop to take it, which was available. But I think Duda is taking an approach where he later will start pushing this g-pawn, and that's why his bishop is outside the fianchetto.
Yeah, and it's so weird. Now that we've seen bishop c4, I start to look at the position, and I really do think about long castling. Whereas previously, I would never have considered it. We've already played a4. But in this particular case, you mentioned it. Bishop and queen line up on the a6 pawn. Black doesn't really have a way to get the rook on the c file, doesn't have a way to break with b5. So getting the rook to d1 in one single move while whisking the king to safety, I think that could be his next idea, Robert.
And white has so many pieces defending the king. The knight on b3 covers the a1 square. That seems unimportant, but just to show you what that could look like, let's say I'm just going to castle and have white castle. If b5, it's really important to note there's no rook a1 check at the end of the line. Now, b5 is still a worthy sacrifice, as we see the eval bar say, actually, this is quite a fascinating battle. But the point is that the knight on b3 does cover a1. So in the event of castle's queenside, you're not going to get checkmated very quickly or anything like that. So that's important to note, even if I don't think you want to see, castle. Will he? No. Come on. Come on. Boo.
I know. The fans, we're all clamoring for long castle, but I'm only clamoring because I'm right here in the commentary booth. I would have probably castled kingside as well.
Yeah, that b5 idea, it's a thematic pawn sack, so we get it, but let's get adventurous. But no, he says, I have a positional edge here with all the control. We get it. So let's go to the other game, because that one looks like it's getting spicier. Anish Giri with the white piece against Pavel Pankratov. We will head on over there right now. And things have, in fact, changed. We'll just show you after castles, b5 was thrown in by Anish to kick this knight away and make sure e5 is more protected. He trades and simply brings his knight to d4. So, Aman, when I look at this position, I'm like, that king on g8, it's going to be hunted. But the eval bar doesn't seem to agree with Anish's choices.
Yeah, and when you look at what Anish has done, you just optically kind of makes sense, right? There's an easy rook a to e1 move to play. There's an easy rook lift, rook f3 to either g3 or h3, quite frankly. And both of those ideas look really simple to execute, really solid. Black's got this rook on b8, rook on f7, bishop on c8 that's still not developed. And, put all that together, and although the eval bar is around even here, I just think it's so much more intuitive and easy to play with white. So I'm not sure how you feel, Robert, but even though the eval bar is saying, hey, you kind of lost some of your edge, I don't feel that that's necessarily the case.
Although Pankratov also seems like the type of player who's been here before. Look at his clock management. He's made many of his early moves quickly, and to Nish, who's spending time, and he just says, I'm going to snuggle on the king side. Queen f8, rook f7, the king is over here. So is that king really unsafe, or is Pankratov just going to play bishop d7, rook to e8, and bring all of those pieces towards his king?
Yeah, that's a good point. And, don't forget that knight on c5 is now on a tremendous square. Like, pretty much untouchable, guarding the weakness, as you're indicating, hitting white's most dangerous attacking piece as well. So I think that part of Black's game has improved so much. So this is going to be two sides executing what seem to be pretty obvious plans here, right? We see rook f3, and wow, the move f5 I did not expect, but it's actually very strong.
Whoa! So Pavel's taking over e4, but giving up e5. So rook g3 clears this f3 square for the knight, but the evaluation bar hovering around equality, and this is dynamic equality. No one's looking at this position if you're a player saying, yeah, it's equal. We're going to make a draw. It's just both sides have chances. And Aman, this knight e4 idea, that looks very annoying for white to deal with.
It does, because also with the move rook g7, I spy the queen on f8 ending up on g7, and you got to be careful about the knights in your position. d4 and c3, they're going to have to start jumping around. So probably both of white's knights will need to displace themselves, like knight c to e2, knight d to f3, and then try to work away into this e5 square. So it's all about the squares right now, Robert. You take some, but you give some while you do that. So f5 gets the e4 square for black, gives away the e5 square. This game is going to revolve around who can control those squares better.
Yeah, if you could bring the knight on c3 to e5 right now, you might just immediately be winning. And one other thing to note is the move f5, while it covers e4, it also welcomes g4 in some positions to open up the king. So I'm wondering how Anish is going to handle this right now. He doesn't look that thrilled, and Pankratov looks bored.
Yeah, he's also got these like 3 Wolverine claw light strikes going down his cam as well. So yeah, he doesn't look bothered by the position. I will say that. Like, he kind of is comfortable with his f5 plan. And the thing is, like, in these rapid matches, I always feel that it's really good when you sort of have a what I like to call a 5-year plan. Like, you're not just playing one move, and thinking ahead just one ply like that. But f5, he knows he's got knight e4 in the bag. He also knows that he's got moves like bishop e8 to improve his bishop, rook c8 to improve his rook. So I see that white's position is kind of almost at its max, whereas black's position still has room to get better.
Right. And I mean, look at Pankratov quickly playing king h8, getting off of the line of this rook on g3. So it does seem that Pankratov, despite having the lower rating, he has the better feel of this position. And that's the thing about chess, right? Pankratov is a strong grandmaster. He's not a 2750 player, sure, but he's proven himself match after match. So Anish is looking at his position like, wait, where's my checkmate? That was the whole point. My queen's on h5. No checkmate for you. And in fact, the underlying structure now is better for white. Anish would love to play b5 back to b2 to protect his a3 pawn, to protect his knight. That pawn has gone too far. It could be a target later. Rook c8, as you mentioned, is going to be an issue down in open files. So I'm starting to really like Pankratov's chances.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's starting to trend that way. And we can't forget that the clock is part of the game here. And it basically has double the time of Anish Giri right now. 10 minutes to 5 minutes here as play continues. He does go for this reroute, knight c to e2. But yeah, I'm seeing the time here, Robert. I'm seeing how black can still improve the position, maybe with moves like queen f6, bishop e8, even that move rook c8 that we mentioned earlier. Every single thing in black's position is clearly improving move by move.
And I like how you framed it before that. It feels like white has achieved his max. And the one thing that is a clear improvement is getting a knight to e5. But with this rook on c8, you have to be very, very careful, as if knight takes d3 ever happens. Not only is b5 going to be a target, but there could be a back rank checkmate if this knight on e2 is dislodged. So a really tough moment for Anish. I think we should... the other game actually hasn't changed all that much. So let's stay here for now, just because I feel like with Anish dropping under 5 minutes, he could find himself blundering in the near future.
Yeah, no, seriously. One thing that you mentioned as like an aggressive plan for white was the move g4. But of course, now that he's stuck his rook in front of that pawn, it doesn't really seem as likely. I can imagine the move queen to f6 will be played here, but you mentioned it a couple moves ago, but that knight on d4 is actually tethered to the square, because if you move it, you basically drop the b5 pawn immediately. Knight takes bishop, and bishop takes pawn. So you can't actually reroute your knight to the square it wants to get to, because it needs to stay on d4.
That's unfortunate. There's also a tactic. If knight takes, I'm going to show this very quickly. And knight takes, if you take the pawn, which we've been talking about, this queen takes d4. And a back rank checkmate down here. So do not blunder back rank checkmates. This knight on e2 is essential. So after a capture on d3, for sure white would capture with the queen. So knight e4 instead played. Pankratov is just taking over right now, Aman.
Yeah, he's just playing playing fluidly. Every move seems part of an overall plan, and pretty much everything about black's position right now is better than it was 10 moves ago, which is just a great sign. As your position starts to improve, that's exactly what you want.
Yeah, he's just feeling it. And Anish, he is locked in right now, concentrated on this e6 pawn. It looks like simple move queen f6 takes care of that. I wonder what White's actual plan is. I see that there's a pawn under attack. Maybe you can go after some queenside pawns. But what is the plan? Do we think a rook trade helps White? Because now that I mention it, I'm kind of liking the idea of rook to c3 at some point.
Yeah, I think at this point, especially if you pay attention to the last couple of moves by White, Queen h5 to f3 to b3, there's a clear shift in White's game plan. He says, okay, I admit there's no checkmate on the spot. It's not going to happen. So then get that rook off g3. I don't think rooks operate very well in front of pawns unless there's a raging attack on the board. So trade it off and, maybe get the move g3 in yourself for White, an escape square for the king, kind of supports f4, stops knight h4. And I think that if this gets to an endgame, there's still room for Anish Giri to seriously outplay his opponent just because of that French bishop, Robert, that we talked about so long ago.
Yes, and if this pawn were on c5, we'd be having a different conversation. And that's what Anish wants in an endgame. It's why he's trading pieces. And for Pankratov, double pawns in endgames, not usually the best thing. So maybe at some point, he'll try to play the move e5, and it helps the bishop out. It also will help the knight out. The knight can recapture. So it's a critical moment for Pankratov. And oh my gosh, look at him. He does look like Wolverine, and I am scared.
Yeah, the three light strikes are so perfect.
Are we gonna have to start calling him Logan? Like, I am worried right now.
And I think Anish should be as well, because he's investing some time into this move. You know what I think? I think he's considering the move e5 seriously here.
Yeah, for sure. Like e5, just breaking open the position a little bit more. I wonder if there's some tactics on the back rank, because we've been talking about how the black king is safe. You take your eyes off your king for 1 second, there could be a diagonal problem or this queen infiltrating, but e5 is the first idea. Even if it's not the first move, it's definitely the first idea that comes to mind.
Yeah, e5 is always there. I mean, even just bringing the king closer works as well. But for example, if we want to bring up an analysis board like king g7, just to bring the king in, White has ideas like rook takes rook and queen c3. And we might see something like that on the board, more or less, queen c3. And all of a sudden, the queen gets into c7. There's tactics against the queen and king here. So I could really see this turning around. And I believe that's why on the board we see a trade and quickly e5, because I think Pavel was concerned about the endgame he could find himself in.
And I'm still concerned about that very endgame, because e5, it helps fix black's pawn structure. We were just mentioning we don't like double pawns and endings, but maybe this knight will land on f4. So this bishop on d7 doesn't have great prospects, and that's not a good sign for Pavel as we enter what looks like we can get into an endgame. And f takes e5 is one move. Queen c7 is another, hitting this bishop on d7. So you take my knight, I take your bishop.
Right.
It's hard to evaluate this position right now.
Yeah, it really, really is. Queen c7 definitely comes to mind, but at the same time, after pawn takes on d4, there's a few tactics that I'm kind of reminded of what you mentioned earlier. Is that knight on e2 is like the only reason there's no back rank mate. So you have to be very careful that you don't allow pawn to d3, for example. Knight takes f4. These kind of tactics all spell checkmate for the white king, which does not have an escape square yet.
There is a very fortunate save for white. After d3, pawn takes, knight takes f4. You're trying to distract this knight away, and we'll show that this is a back rank checkmate in one that Anish wouldn't miss. But he has checks against this king. First check here, and then check here, and he has to pick up this knight with his queen and win the game, because his knight can always retreat to g1 to block a back rank check. That's a very critical save for Anish. He was calculating just that before playing queen to c7, and now that it gets the green light, it's a go. He is attacking this bishop, and I'm starting to like his position.
Yep, I think we are now probably at the most critical moment, because Anish is down on time, but it does seem like Anish is approaching a position where it seems like it might be very drawish, or his opponent could make a mistake. And how quickly can that queen just vacuum up those queenside pawns as well? B7, A7 are all just hanging. So I think we might get a very forcing sequence.
Anish loves a good game of Pac-Man, so he'll be running away from the ghosts, stealing these pawns, and he better not be seeing any ghosts because there is no back rank checkmate. D3, in fact, played.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess there is Queen A1 check, but this knight always not there. Always has G1 to drop back to. So what is the what?
So Queen takes on D3, and
He wants knight F4.
then does he
now.
want knight F4?
He does. And then
Yeah, interesting
Just
endgame.
to show quickly, everybody, that there's a back rank checkmate, so the knight still can't take because Queen
Right.
A1. But are you thinking like what I'm thinking with Queen D4? Like, what's happening here?
Yeah, exactly. And it just becomes what I would say could be simply a very forcing line. Like, we might get a situation here where both sides are trying to liquidate. And look, if we ever get to a position where the only pawns left are black's 1H pawn and white's 2 pawns on the king side, I think we are headed to draw territory. So I think, Robert, is we might be heading for a position where Pavel's down a pawn, but can make the draw.
But this is great news for Anish because earlier he was down the clock. Things were looking a bit shaky. Now he can play for 2 results. He is never losing this game. He is likely going to be up a pawn in the ensuing endgame. And now the onus is squarely on Pankratov's shoulders to hold this draw.
Right.
And that's easier said than done.
Yeah, he has an option. He can play knight h5, or he can take the queen. Both seem to get to similar territory. The thing that about knight h5, which is nice, is that you don't immediately lose your f pawn.
But you lose your A pawn.
That's right. That's a good point.
Yeah, he
Probably
was choosing
way more valuable.
Yeah, and knight d6, protecting and attacking. I guess the good news for Pavel is because he's have a G pawn, his king could like quickly run into the center here and kick this knight out of its place. So I do believe this game ultimately should be a draw, and maybe we should head to the other game because a lot has changed there. Wow, there is now an imbalance, material imbalance in Duda against Serrana, and it's 2 rooks versus a rook and bishop, but black does have an extra pawn for his troubles.
Yeah, wow, this is quite the liquidation, and at this point, although the engine, definitely will favor white, there's no question, a material imbalance for sure. But I'm also looking at this, and I'm not quite sure what happens if you just take everything in sight. Like, if I take on c4 and take on a4, I think white's also running out of pawns, Robert.
That would be the issue. If you just take all the pawns, you will have a rook against a bishop, but rook and king against bishop and king is a draw. So that gives us a place to go to, something to envision. And rook c4, grab the wrong piece, rook c4, rook b6, rook a4. I guess this rook also gets into the party because it's saying it's winning, which must mean that there's some way that you get the second rook on the 7th rank eventually. So a rook will probably drop back at some point and join the other rook and attack.
Yeah, I actually think that you can just go rook b8 after bishop f8 and play rook takes d6.
Oh, it's that simple. Wow.
Yeah, as soon as you said there has to be some way to get the rook involved, I was like, thank you, Robert. I got you.
Yeah, now the rest becomes easy. And that's how you have to think about chess, everybody, is you have to think in concepts and then try to make those work. Don't force the issue, but see if it's available. So c4, if bishop d8, I was about to say that if the bishop were on c7 or on c5, he takes on c4, and now Duda is going to crash through. But if we can bring up an announcement, we do have one, that if bishop d8, I was wondering if the move c5 was available, because you can't take with the b pawn as there's rook b8 pinning and winning the bishop. You can't take with the d pawn because the bishop is hanging. And if you take with the rook, I can take on d6, or I can even just trade rooks, and that's what I was going for. You still can't take with the b pawn, rook b8, and this ending is definitely a win with the rook coming to d7 and going after these pawns.
Yeah, and it's less about the material at this point. Sure, it's 2 pawns and a bishop for the rook, but the activity and the fact that rook can just jump around and eventually create a pass pawn, this is basically just done. And as we get back to the live position here, Robert, I mean, basically exactly what we talked about happened. The rook didn't get involved, but it was at the cost of that f pawn.
Oh gosh, yeah, rook b8 check was clever, just forcing the king away and then winning the f7 pawn. This is completely lost. Serrano knows it, and Jan Shistov, dude, I was about to call him JKD and Jan at the same time, not Jan Shistov, and I just meant John. But JKD here, he's going for demolition. This was Serrano's own doing. He sacrificed in exchange. We can go back later and show that. But this is just going to be mop-up duty for Jan Shistov Duda right now. Yeah,
here there's also nice move, which looks very winning, rook b3. So if you trade, you pick up that A pawn with the rook, and then you have a pass B pawn. And anytime you just have a pass pawn, rook against bishop, you can always escort that pawn up the board very easily.
Oh my God.
But this move is so classy as well, as not only do you have a hanging pawn, but that second arrow is the more dangerous one. Rook f3 is a crusher.
That's why it's longer. It's more dangerous. I'll do it in red. That's the problem that black is dealing with here, is that the bishop is pinned. In fact, the bishop's just lost. You probably have to go rook b7 to go rook f7. But after rook takes d6, you're going to get a passive setup, and white's going to have even pawns and a rook compared to a pinned bishop. So this one's over. How is the other one going? Anish down to 30 seconds or so. Let's go back there because still in that night ending.
And I tell you, Robert, night endings are just so tricky that, even if the eval is 0.00, I never trust the night endgame.
Shocking move. King g2. Was not expecting the king to go backwards over here, but he's avoiding all checks. And a5 is hanging.
True. You have to be a little careful here. So he's going to go king h3.
Mm-hmm. And is there just a knight check? Then you take a5, and that's an outside passer. That's scary.
Yeah, that is scary. You have to be very, very careful.
Amount of time were reversed, we'd say Anish would easily win the game. But because Anish is down to 18 seconds, I feel like that leads me to believe that Pavel will hold.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because at this point, you're up that pawn, but it's difficult to see how to make progress here, because now if you look at the king side, nothing can move. If white moves the king, then king g4. If white moves either pawn, you're going to lose one of the pawns. So I think you've reached a position now where you can almost just keep moving the knight.
And I would say smart move by Anish to keep the pawn on a4. If these pawns were traded off, immediately it's an obvious draw. The knight would come back around and sacrifice for the pawns. But here in the game right now, these knights are sort of frozen on the queen side. And if black decides to run with the king, then the pawns are free to go. So it's a tricky moment for Pavel. He goes back. I think Anish should just slide his king over, and he does.
Mm-hmm.
And Pavel has a good handle on this.
Yeah, he does. If white attacks the pawn or moves the knight at all, I think black does the same. And just, if the a pawns get traded, that favors black, who's trying to liquidate things.
For sure. And knight e5 check, the king probably has to slide back to g3 to stop the king coming to g4. This looks like a draw. By the way, Jan Shistov Duda did in fact win that game right after we left it. So that congrats to the Polish player with his lead. And this one is a draw. Pankratov, great defense by him.
Great defense. And, right at the end there, it was actually threefold repetition, but it wasn't a threefold that I think Giri wanted. You don't feel bad because okay, it was probably a draw. But you do feel like, oh, I didn't realize that was 3 times. That's kind of annoying. I wanted to keep trying there. Because, these top guys, they'll always try to squeeze anything they can out of any position.
Unfortunately for Anish, nothing left to squeeze. All the juice was there in the glass. So it is a draw in this one. Let's remind everybody that there are 2 matches going on for a spot in the round of 8. Jan Shistov Duda beats Alexei Serrano. That was a nice game. And this one, an even finish, I think that is a fair result.
It is a really nice conversion that we saw there from Duda against Serrano. We didn't see exactly how it happened, but the point was, it was all about that d5 square. And when we saw the rook on d5, I think we know, Robert, who won that mini battle, and eventually who won the game as a result. Pankratov against Giri. Really interesting that French, Robert, held up. And that's going to be interesting over the course of this match.
Well, that means more people will play the French, and that is not a good thing. But we do want to shout out a good thing, and it's the Chess.com Global Championship is brought to you by Brave. Brave means private browsing and so much more. By default, Brave blocks ads and trackers on every page and video you visit, even on YouTube. No ads means up to 3 times faster page loads, faster streaming, and faster playback. It means 35% longer battery life while saving on mobile data and internet bandwidth. For Android, iOS, and desktop, get the best browser for gamers, streamers, and creators. Switch in 60 seconds at brave.com/chess. We're going to take a break. It won't be 60 seconds. It'll be a little bit longer than that. But when we return, more from the 2022 Chess.com Global Championship presented by Brave.
Run for my life. Okay.
What's up, man?
Hey, just solving some puzzles.
Get my coffee.
Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot.
Which one is that? Is that our new one?
Yeah. I can't get this one, man. Oh, shoot. What's wrong with you, man? Oh, this is hard.
You sure you're feeling okay?
One. Got it. Ah, shoot.
Bishop takes me one.
And we are back here at the 2022 Chess.com Global Championship presented by Brave. Aman, we have 2 matches up right now. Yanchisev Duda wins his first game against Alexis Serrano. But Pavel Pankratov, he's kind of been the talk of the CGC. He has upset both Viswanathan Anand and Nordibek Abdusattorov. He's here to play.
He is. And we saw that in the first game where he came out flying. Not only was he keeping up with Anish on the board with the French defense, no less, but he also did it on the clock. And I think that, you often see underdogs or lower rated players struggling to keep up on the clock. Like, yes, you can find the same quality of moves as your opponent, but it takes you a bit longer. That's kind of the difference between you. But here, I think he was keeping up. He's definitely giving Anish a run for his money. He kept up tactically. And honestly, just a very well-played game by both. A slight edge to Anish as he was hoping, looking for any way to make that position work. But just great defense, and the result was a draw.
And as you said, that was the key to Andrekin's win over Caruana. Strong defense has been a theme in the CGC, and now he'll have to go on offense. He gets the white pieces. He does start with d4. So Pankratov, he's playing his usual repertoire. And for Anish, we're going to get a Grunfeld or a King's Indian. Not every day we see that from the Dutch number 1.
Exactly. And, well, now the interesting part is F3 played in the opening means that if he committed to that King's Indian, we were going to see a Samish.
and now he plays e6. So I guess Anish thought, oh, this guy tries to play the same-ish. Let me go for some kind of side variation. This is not particularly known. What am I looking at?
Well, Robert, this is really obvious stuff. You're looking at 4 openings in one. This is the 4-in-1 special right now. You've got your G6, right? You've got your King's Indian, your Grunfeld vibes. Then you've got your E6, your Nimzo Indian vibes. And of course, don't forget, you've got your C5 in there for your Benoni/Benko vibes. So all in one, Robert.
Well, that's, I guess, leave it up to the super GM to give you a forward. It's like the 7-in-1 shampoo, conditioners, body wash, deodorant, toothpaste, all in, all in one. So Anish has given us a show here. And after Bishop D3, which is just logical development, he's the one who is now on the clock.
Indeed, yeah. This is basically the reason that players sometimes like to disguise their openings, because you might say, okay, look, if you wanted to play the Benoni, why don't you just play the Benoni? What's with all the theatrics? And it's actually more than theatrics, Robert. The order in which you play certain moves is going to dictate the order in which your opponent must play certain moves. So, of course, once we saw F3 from Pavel with the white pieces, that told Anish that if he all of a sudden transposes this to a Benoni structure, White doesn't have options like Knight F3 anymore. He doesn't have options to play certain setups. So you can avoid some of the stronger setups in a specific opening by starting with a disguised move order.
It's a really good point. And now the knight has hopped G3 rather than its typical F3 square. And White has firm control over the center. But how about these dark squares? There's a pawn C5. And at some points, these dark squares can become a problem for White. H5 is often a tempting move just to think about kicking this knight over here on G3. And the real question is this tension on E6 and D5. Will Black take on D5 right now? Will he continue to keep the tension? What moves can he make? Knight E5, for example, just jumping towards the center. I'm not entirely sure what Anish should do, and I'm not sure he's sure either.
Yeah, he's having a think here. White almost never releases the tension. So I think if Anish does not take on D5, he can also be sure that White will not take on E6. So he decides, look, that's going to stay there the whole game. And guess what? The bishop on C8 would like some more scope on that diagonal. So E takes D5 played. And your idea, Robert, looking to kick the knight. And I love that we see castles because we get to place the knight on what should be the worst square on the board with knight H1. But there's actually a lot of poison to this idea.
Right, knight H1, the knight will eventually go to F2, where it supports the E4 pawn. If you want to push forward, you want to make sure your pawn E4 is well defended. Right now, the chain is excellent, but the chain will shrink as Black can make moves like H3 at some point. So knight H5 for Black is available. Look at the bishop on G7. It's a monster. E5, D4 under Black's control. I'm feeling this for Anish, and he may later throw in F5 as well.
Yeah, I have to say, this is one of those openings that everything about it feels good for Black. It makes sense. It's very logical. The F5 move, knight H5, knight E5, it all flows. But at the same time, I feel like the strong players handle this with White so well. And I'm always so impressed to see it because intuitively, I look at what I see on the board. I see bishop D4. I see knight E5. I start to get a little clammy, a little scared with the white pieces. But White can just handle it like a champ. Bishop E3 to take care of that bishop D4 check. You've got knight F2 coming, but your ideas are all there, Robert. F5, knight E5, bishop E5 even. What do you like the most here?
I like knight E5 and F5. I'm just going full steam ahead. After knight E5, your bishop can't go to C2 because you need to cover the C4 square as well. So I'm liking this for Anish. I'm sure he is as well. Let's catch the knight E5 play. I think Pavel will have to sit and think. He's been playing quite quickly throughout the match. But now it's time for him to think. Let's go to the other game. It has just started. We do have a Cambridge Springs variation. I love me some Cambridge Springs. You get the two knights for White over here, and Black's bishop pair, not exactly the best.
Yeah, I mean, this opening just sounds like it was named after some middle of the rack water brand. It's like just your average Cambridge Springs, and it's an opening that I feel like I haven't seen as much recently, but this used to be all the flavor. And hang on, queen to C6, Robert. I'm actually really curious what happens after that. Are we seeing like queen a4 or something crazy?
This knight on b5 isn't actually under attack. It's one of the main points here as the bishop defends it, tactically speaking. But queen c6, yeah, queen a4 with knight c7 to follow looks interesting. There's knight e5 ideas as well. Give the rook in the corner to get the other rook. I don't know. I don't know the theory here, but it seems like Alexei Serrano does.
Yeah, and this is one of those cases where we just saw the face wash from Duda there, which is the like, okay, let me just have a look see here and make sure we don't blunder the whole game away on move whatever 7, 8 we're at.
It could, and I think this is a novelty. I'm clicking in the Game Explorer. I don't see games with knight to b5. So Serrano, he's showing that he's put in the work, and he needs to get this game right here because Duda won game 1. Serrano doesn't want to keep trailing heading into game 3 where Duda gets the white pieces once more. And if we bring up an analysis board, I want to show Aman's line because I think it's beautiful. That queen c6, it looks like a double attack of the rook on h1 and the knight on b5. But queen a4 is a very creative way of not just defending the knight, but threatening knight c7 with the queen pinned on c6. And you put bishop d7, trying to get out of the pin and attack this knight here. I think knight e5 looks very promising in the position. There's also times you like push this pawn to d5 just to shut the queen off. Because if you take here, I believe there's some kind of knight c7 check, although the eval bar is not really saying much. So it's
like everybody loses their queen and it just gets into a total mess. But you know what? If it gets to a total mess like this, you'd rather have the total mess as Serrano, who's clearly prepared this mess in advance.
And I mean, that was the natural move. Take a queen. It's the wrong move. It's queen a5 first. Then after
Robert.
b6, then you take, and black's pawn structure is shattered. So takes. Just do this, and you grab this one. c5 is weak. I get why this is better for white, but I didn't prepare this. This is just happening on the fly.
Exactly. And the reason I think that Duda is so puzzled at the moment is because I think he understands the seriousness of his decision. Queen c6 appears just visually to make a threat against white's rook that can't be dealt with. Like e4, d5, f3, these are all subpar moves. So he knows that what he's about to be hit with is probably more prep. Like if he plays the more challenging looking move, queen c6, he knows there's a knight e5 lurking, there's a queen a4 lurking. It's going to be something, and he has to be prepared to handle the resulting positions, not just one move at a time. You can't go one step at a time, Robert, into someone else's prep.
No, and knight e5 does look scary, as you're mentioning, because even if you lose this rook on h1, you have knight c7 check. The king is going to go on a journey. But what other moves do you have? Let's say you play queen d8. Oh, let me just drop my queen back to where it started. After d takes c5, there's knight d6 check. It may not be winning, but you certainly need to calculate it. There's queen takes queen and castles queenside. So there are all sorts of tactical problems that black needs to figure out. Not that black is really in trouble. We see the evaluation bar. Duda will use his big brain. He's a very smart and accomplished player, but it looks scary. So you don't want to just assume you're okay. You need to calculate that you really are.
Yeah, that's, we can make a few assumptions here with the help of the eval bar that these guys don't get. And that's what makes it so challenging here is that, knight b5, queen d8 actually is the best move, but it's kind of based on bishop takes the pawn back on c5 and being comfortable playing a move like king to e7. And, being okay with a move like that this early in the game is something you have to come to terms with, right? And that takes time for you to admit that, oh, this is actually the best way, I think, to get around this.
And you also have to stop thinking that you're in your opponent's prep. You know that you are because Alexei has spent almost no time, but you need to stop just being scared because of that. And I know that's happened to me before where I trust my opponent too much. And Jan Shistov, he'll calculate, he'll dig deep. Maybe queen b8 is also an option. I don't really like putting the queen over there. So queen d8, kind of by process of elimination, is likely what we'll see. So thank you, Giraffe Hunter, for the kind words. But let's maybe go back to see what Anish Giri is up to against Pavel Pankratov. Kind of weird to say that because Pavel had the white pieces, but look at black getting everything you could possibly want in a Benoni structure.
Exactly. And, I just want to stress again, this is why Giri started his game in such an unorthodox manner. G6, E6, C5. What he got was what I would consider to be one of the lines against the Benoni, which is very non-threatening. So once you get your opponent to commit to f3, you know what their structure is going to look like for the ensuing game. And a lot of players will never play the Benoni, but if they know in advance what line you're going to play against it, and they say, oh, that's actually not a very scary line at all, then they'll take it. I'll take a Benoni every single game if I could guarantee that line. That's sort of what he's done here. And, he's liking the position as a result.
It's such an essential point because the Benoni is scary structurally. You have this pawn on d6, but there was no knight landing on c4 in this position precisely because there's a pawn on f3. The knight goes f3 to d2 to c4 in many positions. But Aman, you have called it out since the beginning. It's true that Pavel never was able to get the ideal positioning of his pieces. And now, for Anish, you have what looks like a dream position. Where to from here? Looks are not enough. You can't just enjoy the aesthetic. You need to create threats. So where do the threats come from?
Yeah, and let's not forget, that knight on d1 might look silly going backwards, but knight e3 and knight c4 potentially, even knight g4 threatening queen h6, these moves all make a lot of sense, and they're happening really, really quickly. So Black's in a position where I agree. I think it's a great spot, but you almost feel a little bit overextended. Everything in White's position is truly solid. Great pawn chain all the way up to the middle of the board, and you've got knights that can always reroute to wherever they need to be. It might be a slow process, but they will get there eventually. Black, on the other hand, are we going to see the move f5?
Whoa.
Wow, b3 play. Did not expect that one, Robert.
Oh my gosh, he just gives up control of some dark squares. He has a light square bishop. He can cover that color complex. He hands c3 right back to the knight. I hated that move. I really did not like it.
Yeah, that whole plan I didn't even think of it, first of all, to be quite honest. And I mean, look at how quickly the moves are coming out in return. Knight back to c3. Now, look at the pawn on b2. It's anchoring the knight. And look at the knight. It's covering a2. So you can't even get at the pawn. Like, I just see the queen side as almost an afterthought now. You can just leave it and focus on the queen side, or on the king side, and that's what he's done.
Oh, but look at this. If queen takes h4, your queen is trapped after g5. Queen h5, rook h8. That is sick.
That is so nasty. Played so quickly as well.
And of course, it says 0.2. It's like an even trade. And it is Lasker compensation. It would be a knight, a pawn, and a rook for a queen. That's 9 versus 9 if you're keeping count at home. But instead, Pavel trusts him and goes queen back to e3 and says, no, let me not give up my queen. I like my position, but d6 is hard to get at. So that's the one thing that Anish can be happy about, is his weak pawn can't be targeted too easily. And queen d4 is not out of the question, because if we get an ugly pawn structure, did he just play that? Yeah, I was wondering how. I was like, I didn't click the square yet, but if we get this trade, you try something like this, in comes the bishop to b5, things of this nature, and it feels like Black is suddenly getting a lot of activity.
100%. And once that knight disappears, knight f4 is coming in, rook a2 is now available, and basically everything we were talking about that was covered is now possible.
Right. And I think just to finish off the variation, we get something like this. We're like, okay, I'll get your rook on f8. That's all good. But first of all, we can play crazy pieces, and I can take your pawn here. But even if I just take your knight on f8, or even move the bishop back somewhere, play rook a2, knight f4, I don't really see why White should be better despite having the extra pawn. I love Black's activity.
Definitely. That's important to remember because, well, first of all, as you mentioned, how the heck did queen d4 appear so quickly on the board? Well, it was played, and after queen to c1, you could consider knight g3 there, but probably unnecessary after rook d1.
And f5 is the choice just going forward. And speaking of going forward, I think we need to go back to the other game. I just opened it off the side of the screen here. So we're going to go back to Duda and Sarana, because look at this, Aman. Duda
Madness.
Allows his king to be stuck in the center. It wasn't queen a4, a move that I thought was very interesting. It was knight e5, which seems to be a great choice. Sarana, still in his prep, checks the king up, takes this rook on a8. And now Duda is down nearly 10 minutes. And according to the eval bar, he's in huge trouble.
Yeah, and the thing about this line is that, let's say you prep the move knight b5, you know with 100% certainty that they've also prepped this position, because this is the most logical continuation. You think Serrano is going to play knight takes a8 and say, yep, okay, job done. That's my prep. I'm going to stop calculating here. No, he's looked so much deeper than this. He probably knows the next 3 moves that are very likely to happen for black. And Robert, looking at that king, it's always this kind of developmental faux pas to have your king step in front of your bishop because you're blocking your bishop, which means you're blocking your rook. You're down like 8 points of material there.
You are not playing with all of your pieces. And the knight on 8 also won't get trapped. There's knight c7 as a free square. Don't think you want to take on d4 and bring more pieces to the attack and open the c file. He plays g6, which is detested by the engines, but I think we can get it. He wants to get his bishop out and bring his rook into the game. But Aman, can he just take on c5? Is that out of the question?
Yeah, I was going to say 2 moves that stand out to me here are pawn takes on c5 and a move like queen to c2. Basically, I want to threaten a check somehow. So whether I'm taking on c5 or playing queen c2, I want to threaten that, and I want to castle ASAP because then I can make tons of threats against the queen, get my final bishop into the action, and queen c2 facilitates both. So that move jumped out to me, but d takes c5, as you said, is a very strong looking move.
I think if dc5, queen d5 is the immediate reply. Like, let me get these queens off the board. I'm offering a queen trade, and this knight's under attack. So I don't think white can easily deal with both. And Serrano plays queen, the best move.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Just opening up everything.
It is like just kind of sad that white's best move might be queen a4 and queen takes a7. I just like so caveman, but it gives white the b6 square. And it also threatens queen takes c5. So you're kind of doing everything. But most importantly, long castle for white is just going to show the difference between the 2 positions. As soon as white gets castled, you realize black's like 3-4 moves out from having his king on g7, bishop developed to h6, and rook to d8. He's shaking his head. He's way down on the clock, but the clock isn't even the most concerning part. He's dead on the board, Robert.
Oh, he is busted. I was going to say somebody call Yasser Serouan, but I know he doesn't have a cell phone. But we have a pawn grabber, Alexei Serrano, grabbing pawns on the queen side that allows the knight to get out to b6 as well. And bishop h6, the eval bar goes up, up, and away. And I think it's the simple queen takes a7, threatening.
Really looks like it.
Not just taking a pawn on c5. If you get a check on c5, this king is getting mated. So this is done.
It's just such a convincing game. There's so many things because the other thing is, Robert, bishop on h6. What's it doing? It's not even doing anything, right? So it's more just developing to move other pieces. It's not even developing to its preferred square. So bishop h6 is just, hey, I want to get my rook to d8 basically, but it's not really where that bishop wants to be.
No, this is terrible position. And I labeled his win over Mamedyarov Serrano's immortal. This is going to be Serrano's miniature. This is only 15 moves into the game. And queen takes a7. I don't even think you can save your pawn c5. So you can just go full caveman, as you said. Just grab 2 pawns. Even if it results in a queen trade, you're up so much material. And this is over.
It's over. Rook d8, like, you don't get to put your king on f8 and g7 in one move. Queen takes c5, and you're stuck in the middle and just dead lost because you're going to have to play rook d6 there or king e8, and, there's the knight coming to c7 for a pretty nasty checkmate.
Oh, my gosh. I'm just going to show that because you don't see checkmates like this very often. This check, the queen covers the diagonal, the knight covers d7, and if you played rook d6, you'd lose a bishop on c8 at the very least. So this is gross. Queen a7, knight e4 played. And what does it say? Plus 6.5, it looks like. Knight b6.
Plus 6.5. And I'm even looking at the position. I'm kind of wondering, what's the material? And what are we, up 1 pawn? Plus 6.5, up a pawn, Robert? That's called pretty damn good compensation.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, this is an issue. And knight b6 is like the obvious move. Watch him play some kind of queen b8 and queen c7.
Oh my! No, the fact you've even said it, now it's gonna happen.
It just feels that this has been. I love the game, but queen b8, slither that queen in.
Right.
Knight takes f2.
So I think he wanted to guard b7 as a primary. Like knight takes c8, rook c8, queen b7 would be like actually game over. So long range defense there. But yeah, again to your point, what if king takes?
I usually trust Chisav Duda, but this feels like desperation. It's like a bluff. Let me just try something. King F2, Queen H2, simple Bishop G2. And if you want to keep checking me, you're going to have to keep sacrificing pieces, but you're going to run out of firepower at the end of the day. It looks like Alexei Serrano is going to be up a piece at the very least.
So, I mean, if you want to bring up an analysis board and at least put what might be going on in his head on the board, we could play king takes f2, queen takes h2 check, bishop g2, bishop takes e3 check, king takes e3, and queen takes g2. And, he's kind of saying, look, my b7 pawn is defended. Oh, yeah, even makes a lot of sense as well. It takes on g3 and then takes on d4.
Oh,
There's
my
some tricks
gosh.
here as well.
Yeah, no, that's it. This king, this knight, this bishop, all of these pieces are pretty loose. So that's the one hope that Jan Chistov has. So let's go to this moment here. You don't take on e3. That's a mistake. And I guess you can play the cold-blooded king f3.
So simple.
Trapping the queen. Knight c8 followed queen takes b7 is not just winning pieces, it's checkmating the black king. So the simple approach of let me just not allow you to check my king is the way to go. But knight takes f2, it's the best try in a completely losing position.
Yeah, and he's got 3 minutes and also no confidence in his position. He knows that he's dead in the water. He got out-prepped, he got caught, and he ended up in a position that I think he just misevaluated, and he was he understood the evaluation as the moves went on, and by that point, it was just out of reach.
And Alexei takes, so this game will likely see queen h2 and this line we were looking at, but I think after the king gets to f3, it's all done. But Jan Chisov's not even moving. He's the one who sacrificed the piece. You have to play with momentum here. You have to just say, at least you're bluffing, but you're just pretending like you've done something accurate. And, well, bishop g2, Serrano has this in the bag.
I think so. Yeah, bishop g2 is nice and simple here. There's knight c8 to follow. I mean, white's up a piece. The other thing is, Robert, where do you think his prep ended? Or, better question, do you think his prep ended?
Probably around queen a4. He knows it's completely winning for him, and he'll figure out the rest later. And, it's been a success. But let's go to the other game, just because I'm catching that one out of the corner of my eye. It's even material, but I wouldn't call this an even ending, despite what the evaluation bar says. There's a passed pawn on b3. If that pawn is gobbled up, then black's in big trouble. So which side would you rather have?
Yeah, I was about to say, Robert, even material, 0.00 by the engine? Come on, this is a draw. We all know that. But far from it. It looks like there's lots of play still. Knight d3, knight takes b3, a forcing sequence in order to pick up that b pawn. And I think if he had held on to that b pawn any longer, Giri was probably taking it to the house. But no, I think this could still go either way. I have to say my instinct is that if it goes wrong for someone, it's going to be white.
I agree. And it's weird to say because white's up a pawn. But let's say you play very logical move, rook b1, getting out of a pin and protecting your knight. Then after rook a3, I just feel like your pieces are all sorts of tied down. Because if your best move is some kind of knight c1, not really feeling that black can start going after pawns. And this king can be used as a weapon in the endgame. So I do agree with you that if white just passively defends, the extra pawn won't be very meaningful. So Pavel needs to find a good series of moves right now.
Yeah, he does, because I think if you turtle into that situation where rook b1, knight d3, back to c1, then all of a sudden black goes knight f4, king f6, king e5, and the factor down a pawn, it's irrelevant when you look at the quality of the pieces that are on the board.
Right. This is a big moment here for Pankratov because this could make or break his Cinderella run. He does play rook b1. I think rook a3 is a bit automatic. Maybe there's something else that black can go for. Of course, he can always take on e4 and then bring the knight back to... Oh, that's not f6. That's f6. And go after the pawn. But I like tying down white's pieces.
Yeah, and I was thinking that the better way to maybe go about things could be knight b3 to c1. And even though you allow bishop c2, there's a check you can throw in on b7. And then, the knights can kind of bounce around. Knight e1 and the knight on d3 I wanted there because f4 is covered.
Yeah. So if this king just runs away, with knight e1, attack the bishop. There's like all sorts of rook a1 ideas.
True.
How is this holding on after rook a1?
Come on, king f2 and rook c7, Robert. This is
just, my gosh. And then you have to really calculate this. This is not like...
I know.
It's like, oh, it's even. You get to this position, and if we'd already captured, white would be in huge trouble. But because we haven't captured yet, that gives white some chances. So maybe there is a move sequence even better for black along the way. But I guess
throw in the capture, Robert. We're geniuses. We got to the end of the line. Now we wish we captured. Let's do it right at the beginning and then do the exact same thing.
Oh, yeah, let's do that here. And then look at the evaluation. Okay, we got this. We had this the whole time. So the point is that if you take on c2, rook c1 is check, and you win the knight. So that's why we said this sequence, but this is bad news for white as black starts taking all the pawns, and we'll get a passer.
Here we go. Yeah, working backwards. We had the solution, and then we just had to figure out how to get there.
He took on b3 and just went for the very straightforward approach. He wants a rook a1 check, a knight g4 check, things like that. And even though should be a draw, I still feel like there's room to go wrong for both sides.
For sure. Because at this point, it's a pretty sturdy pawn. I was about to say after rook b4. And rook e2 looks like a way to try to get it, because knight f2 would be a little embarrassing. It's like a funny way to back rank mate yourself using a knight as a pawn, basically.
Yeah. Good.
And yeah, it doesn't look like there's any way to defend that other than maybe going e5.
And that just... Oh, the h4 pawn is hanging over here. I didn't even realize that. But that should give black a passer and enough, and d5 is hanging. So I like rook e2. He's going for maybe trying to win this game.
True.
I don't know if I believe in it. The bar still says level, but oh my goodness. I think Duda, by the way, is down 2 full pieces now.
Right. It's it's in the very convincing territory for Serrana.
Yeah, I'll just show that position quickly so everyone can see where we're at, where Serrana has been chasing Duda's king, and Duda's king is out on f6. And wait, what? Is the evo bar? No, the evo bar. Way. Yeah, the evo bar is stuck. Okay. Oh no!
There's no way.
What?
Is that just the biggest?
What?
The biggest blunder?
Oh my gosh! He spent a minute and a half on rook f1, and that move gives away the advantage. He could have just taken this bishop on e3 that was available to him. He could have played.
And Robert, can you go back to when the move knight takes c8 was played? I'm curious when that move happened. So okay, it was g4, and I was going to say that in all these lines, before white even took the knight on f2, I was wondering, why not throw in knight takes c8? Because it's one of those moves that if black takes the knight back on c8, you always have queen takes b7, winning the game on the spot. Right. And I feel like if I played knight takes c8 before even capturing the knight on f2, you'd have to take back. You can't just give me a free piece out of nowhere. But because we didn't do it earlier, the way that it was reacted to here was king f6, which is definitely trickier than capturing.
But what are we missing here? What is wrong with king takes e3? You have 3 minor pieces.
He totally blanked on bishop f4.
You have 3 pieces. If queen takes g2, let me just keep taking stuff. My knight will always block a check. If you take on d4, I can take with my queen, and your king is just in trouble. So he went rook f1, which looks good, missing bishop f4, and now you see it on his face. I mean, he is already distraught, and he might lose this game.
That would just be ridiculous to lose the game. Queen a3, arguably one of the best moves. I think to be able to spot one of the best moves in a position after blundering to the degree that he just did is so hard to do. So to even find a move that keeps the eval bar even for white at this point, I'm going to say is impressive.
Yeah, that is a big move. Rook takes c8, very natural. Give me that knight back. What's the material? Black has 6 pawns and is down a piece. So it's 2 pawns for a knight, and there's a king on f3 and a king on f6.
And there's pieces hanging as well. Like queen g3 is about to win more. So you've got to cover that almost like rook. Geez, rook f2 or what?
Yeah, rook f2 looks like the move necessary. And I'm so lost with what's going on here. But can we check and think about taking this queen?
Yeah, and then taking on d4 and saying, look, I'm going to just have the most pawns in the world.
Because if c takes d4 now, is there king e4? Like, you protect your knight and put pressure on this bishop here?
Yeah, the king is literally winning king of the hill and still trying to play a chess game.
It happened. King e4. Somebody crowned Serrano here. And I think g5 is the only move. Thankfully, it's for Duda, it's an easy move to play.
It is.
And we have
easy.
3 pawns for a piece, and it's zeros. So it's anyone's game.
Oh my goodness. What are we watching right now? And we might see one of the weirdest, like, knight d7 check, queen e7, like
How in the world did this happen? I am keeping an eye on the other game. It looks like the end game is getting sharper, but oh my gosh.
It's nothing sharper than a king on e4 with tons of pieces still on the board.
I'm going to show the other game very quickly here just because it is actually quite sharp. There are now 2 passers in the center for white. Black has 2 passers of his own. There's a pin going on, and it is a time scramble. So Pankratov does need to be accurate because knight g4 does look like a pretty big threat.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where the engine's like, yeah, even because it just knows what's going on. But the human is thinking, I don't know, either side could win. Whoever mobilizes those pawns better, that's it.
And I'm going to flash the other game back because this game, even I think there was a mistake by Duda. So bring this, move king f3 here. We'll trade knights, and that should lead.
It should be a draw. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
king
or just
f3 is a
check.
big move.
Yeah, we might get back and forth here at the moment. But the other game, just to bring that up, I saw the move king g7 played, not g5, and the eval bar goes sky high. So what
queen
is
E7.
the move? Oh, is that simple?
I don't know, but queen e7 is just screaming at me right now.
But bishop takes e5?
And rook takes f7, and rook f8 mate. No, you go king g8.
King g8, because king h8, that is mate, as you're saying. By the way, this is happening. King g8.
Wait. But is there queen e6 and rook f3? Queen e6 and queen g2, rook f3?
Oh my gosh.
It's just madness.
This has been the wildest game ever. So
this is an absolutely insane game. I can't believe it's still going, Robert.
I don't think there's a checkmate there because the rook being pinned means there's not enough firepower. The other game has resulted in a draw. We left at just the right moment. Anish Giri, Pavel Pankratov still locked up 1 point apiece. But what is happening here? There apparently is a win for Serrano. Rook Queen e6 is looking really good. And my other instinct is rook f2 just to defend my bishop and threaten Queen e6.
I like your move better. It seems way more lethal because e6 is so hard to protect.
And a minute on the clock here for Alexei Serrano. He's already made a number of errors after obtaining a winning position. He must be nervous, but Duda looks stressed. And Queen e6 played. The eval bar plummets. Queen here.
Because I think that it just results in a position where you go rook f3, king, g7, and king h6, king g7, and I just don't know if there's more than a repetition.
Although this rook is hanging here, so I think after is there king h6 as you said, queen f.
I think you must, right? Otherwise maybe it is trouble.
Right, because you do lose this rook, and maybe there's a way that black
true, yeah,
has like a bunch of checks that allows him to survive. He does play king h6. What? Oh my gosh.
Incredible. And I honestly think we'll get a repetition because guess what? This is not a position that white can play on and on and on without, you can't just keep playing this. What the best line appears to be to me is like king h6, queen h4, queen e7, and then try g5.
Oh, and the king will have to walk up somehow.
Exactly. King h5, king takes g5. It's just madness.
Wait, that looks really scary. And Serrano thinking he might do this. And look at Jan Chisov's clock, by the way, 19.2 seconds. So if he starts throwing pieces at the black king and he has a minimum a draw by repetition, then of course this is the right choice.
Yeah, it can only get better.
And he's thinking, he's spending time. He's down on the clock now, 15 seconds. He goes queen h4, step one.
He already has his draw, so it's whether he wants to play g5.
He should play g5. I don't see, and there's nothing less than a repetition. He has so many checks. He goes for it.
Yeah.
King, do you take or bring the king this way?
Oh my goodness, what a choice. I think I take. Because the rook is pinned, so I don't see how you join like any other pieces to the attack.
Just king h6, queen h4. Maybe this is the way to draw now.
Yeah, or king h5, queen h7, back and forth seems also good.
And Serrano, he needs to make this draw because he'll lose the game if he doesn't.
He will lose the game. I don't think white can play on.
With the king here, down to pawn, and he's 8 seconds. He makes the check.
These guys are going to make one of the most insane draws I have ever seen.
Oh my gosh, and what a disappointment for Serrano, who knows he was winning out of the opening. And for Jan Chisov Duda, there was a little smile there. We saw that.
Oh, yeah. That's the I got away with one smile.
He most certainly did. So 2 draws in the second games of this match. But this was anything but an even game. This was as topsy-turvy as it gets.
Robert, we had 2 draws, but it couldn't be further from the same kind of draw. Like, one of them was, more or less neck and neck. We thought Giri had a little bit of a push, but again, we're seeing that resilience and defensive prowess of Pavel Pankratov in this match, and he holds it steady. And meanwhile, after the win in the first game by Duda, what a way to bounce back by Serrano. Some expert prep. This is like high-level stuff. You were saying might have been the first time that it's been brought out as well. And for that not to be converted into a win, he will be kicking himself. So disappointing if you're Serrano, but you got to hand it to Duda. He was shaking his head, Robert. He was ready to mentally quit, but he stayed in the game, and he earned himself a half point when he should have gotten up.
It's almost worse to use stellar preparation and not win. You start feeling like you lost the game rather than a simple draw. So we'll see if Serrano can hold it together going into game 3. Anish Giri, Pavel Pankratov locked up, and we are going to head to another short break. And we want to tell you all to stay where you are. The action continues here at the Chess.com Global Championship presented by Brave.
open to anyone, all around the world.
Oh!
The Chess.com Global Championship offers the dream of playing against the best.
We are in for a wild ride.
And hey, have we mentioned there's also $1 million at stake?
The total pot is $1 million.
No, that is not a typo. The prizes are unbelievably generous.
The CGC knockout phase has hit crunch time. We began with thousands of players, now only a handful remain.
131 moves is what it took for Wesley So to make it to Toronto on an unbelievable defensive effort, Amon.
No matter who you are, things are about to get very, very real.
It's a huge collapse from Caruana.
It all went downhill. And Dmitry Andreikin punches his ticket to the round of 8 in unreal fashion.
At stake, a trip to the finals in Toronto and a clean shot at the largest first place prize of the year.
E6 was winning!
My friends, it's the CGC round of 16. Who's headed to Toronto? It's time to find out.
The Chess.com Global Championship presented by Brave has a face that you will want to remember. That is Alexei Sarana. Now, he may not have his happy face on, Amon, because he just spoiled a completely winning set of opening preparation.
Yeah, and if you're Alexei Sarana right now, I can't stress enough, focus on the positives from that game. Like, let's not forget, he took one of the best prepared players in the world, JKD, and he beat him, in a matter of 10 to 15 moves. Like, it was over, it was done, preparation was immaculate. Yes, he spoiled it, he didn't get the full point, but you can't focus on that right now. Just remember that, you out-prepared him. You can do that. The openings are at that level, and he needs to be in that mindset and focus on the fact that he can't outplay this guy and out-prepare him, if he wants a chance at winning this match. Full credit to Duda, but Alexei Sarana, you see his achievements there. I mean, the guy's world-class, and he just, we saw him in a bad moment where he didn't convert what he had earned. But Robert, he's right there in this match, and he's shown that he can come back.
Yeah, he's earned his keep thus far with 2 great wins in matches over Vidit and Mamajara, but he wants to keep going. He didn't enter this tournament. He qualified for it, not just to, fizzle out early. He wants to make it to Toronto. He will need to strike back. We see the Group B matchup between Duda and Sarana. But Giri and Pankratov, 2 draws. It feels like they've been very balanced thus far. We haven't seen either player jump to like a +2 or, in the case of Sarana, Duda, like a +7. No, they've actually kept it very tight.
Very tight indeed. And because of that, it means that the pressure is actually increasing of every single game, every single good move that gets played, Robert. I just get the feeling that the first person to make a big blunder, probably not only is the other guy going to take advantage of it, but that might be the match right there. Whenever you have these matches that it start, draw, the first person to win, trust me, they usually win the match. So the stakes, I feel, are so high in this match, and the way it's going, although Giri's played a tremendous match, I think Pankratov is the more satisfied player thus far, Robert, with how it's progressed.
Yeah, when you're 27-50 plus, you're not satisfied with 2 draws against a player that isn't in your rating range. And Giri did get an advantage in game 1, so we shouldn't forget about that French defense that was nice for the white side. So we'll see if Anish answers it before I can finish my point. He's playing the French once again, and will Pankratov repeat the line?
I wonder, will Pankratov repeat the line? I also wonder whether Giri will. So I have this thing where usually if the line goes well for a player or the game goes well, then they're actually the player that deviates first. And we kind of see that here, that Pankratov, he kind of got away with it. He played really natural in that French game. It seemed to work well for him. You might say, okay, why not go for it again? Well, guess what? Giri definitely just looked at that. He probably noticed he had an advantage. And I guarantee you, he worked out the remedy.
For sure. And that's why Pavel plays a6. It covers the b5 square. He can, in fact, play b5. But just because you play b5 does not solve the biggest problem in the French. This bishop on c8, the light square bishop, it doesn't have a good diagonal to work with. He instead plays b6. So not advancing his pawn as much. And the reason why is that had you played b5, we can bring up an analysis board just to show you some of the nuances of the French, is that once white takes on c5, the pawn on b6, you take back and control the center. In a position like this, on the other hand, you just clog the d4 square, so the bishop doesn't get to see the light of day.
Great point. Yeah, this is, it's all really about that c8 bishop at the end of the day. Whether it has some scope, and the move b6, more reserved. After the move bishop d3, we kind of talked about a plan involving c4 and b5 and a full queenside expansion. The only thing about this position is it is a little bit different than the last time we saw it. There's no rook on b8, and you've already played b6. So I feel like you're kind of 2 moves slower because rook b8 is useful and b6 is not. And we have one and not the other.
No, it's a really good point. And this opening is all about nuances, 0 trades, all nuance. And one of them is that you need this tension on the d4 square, because if black ever plays c4, then white will strike with f5. White cannot play f5 now because then you take on d4 and e5 falls as well. So that's where the fight is. It's all about the center, d4 pawn and the c5 pawn challenging it. That's what's telling the tale. The bishop on c8, not a good piece. Bishop on d3 is looking at the black king side if, in fact, black does castle. So Pankratov has a difficult choice right now, whether or not to castle, because it does feel like white can bring firepower to the king side.
Indeed. Always such a tough decision. I feel like when you play the French defense, you're always faced with this moment of, okay, can I castle kingside? And the answer is pretty much usually yes. But your brain and the ghosts and the threats and just that uncertainty always says, that's pretty scary looking. So even if black can castle, and he should, there's that moment where you just give a little more credit to your opponent's attack.
And Pankratov, he's really taken to think. In game 1, the guy was moving instantly. So even though objectively his position wasn't good, he was feeling it. Now he plays c4, and you see the eval bar creep up. What? I was not expecting this.
I don't think the eval bar is creeping anymore, Robert. I think it's stomping, it's making a lot of noise, and it's way up there for the white pieces right now. c4, I talked about it earlier. I think b6 was a waste of time. There's no rook b8. I see c4 as already a little bit off, but then the move f5. We talked about that move the first time they played this game. We said it's probably not going to be the right idea. When you see this, Robert, are you thinking en passant, or are you thinking to leave it there and open up the position afterwards?
I'm leaving it because I'm going to play g4. I'm going to play knight g5, attacking I was about to say something. Let me bring up an analysis board here real quick, because Anish is like, Robert, go away. You don't know.
Yeah, what are you talking about, Robert? Here.
What I liked was that black is very cramped. So when a side is cramped, I don't want to trade pieces. I want to play knight g5. If we're going to trade pieces this way, we're opening up files. I'm going to play g4 later. If your best move is knight f8, I can play g4 and just advance on the king side. Black has no space whatsoever.
Yeah. And I think just conventionally, when you follow the principles, that just makes so much sense. Because the reason why Giri played takes in 95, I think that could just be because of a preference thing. Like, he might just want a more open position against his opponent right now, rather than a closed one. Because what have we seen? We've actually seen Pankratov be such a resilient defender. I think Anish might be just thinking more on principle and less with, raw calculation, that I just want an open position because I think it'll be tougher to defend.
Yeah, and we should be very clear about this. White is obviously for choice. This position is nice for Anish, but I wasn't expecting him to just hop in the center so quickly. It does give black more breathing room. This bishop, for example, can go to d6. There's no pawn on e5. That's why the knight's on f6 to begin with. So it just seems like Pavel has a little bit more to work with, even though it's clearly nice for Anish.
Yeah, and just look at the quality of the pieces, right? Rook's exactly where they want to be. I would say the last thing I would improve about White's position is potentially bishop on e3 to f2, maybe to g3, and then look to play pawn to f5. And you're kind of hitting that queen and rook through the x-ray.
And look at Pankratov. He plays b4. Pavel wants to open up that queen side, but he hasn't taken back. So he intuited that was the right choice, but he hasn't figured out how he should recapture it. Knight takes b4 looks wrong, because where's the knight going? Bishop takes b4 looks the most natural. And then I think Amon, your plan is right. Like we can play bishop f2. You can also start playing g4 and push your pawns in the king side. I'm still enjoying Anish's position.
For sure. Yeah, this is just so comfortable. And the bishop on c8 as well. If you ever move it like bishop b7, you're also really concerned about your e-pawn. As soon as white plays bishop to f2, the rook just, exerts all the pressure. And did we even consider rook takes b4? I'd be honest with you, I definitely didn't.
I see why he's doing it. He's putting pressure on the pawn, but there are tactics here. That's why the eval bar shot to +4. So
that's insane.
It must be like some kind of f5.
Yep.
Collapsing the position.
The thing is, if you tell me that there's a move here, you don't even have to tell me which one, but some move that gives that level of an evaluation, I think, Robert, you're on the same page. F5 just has to be the move.
Right. Because this position is pretty closed, right? So there's no tactic, there's no sacrifice, but I see +4 off this side of the board here, and there's f5 and there's +4.
Yeah, and Giri didn't spend more than 30 seconds finding that. So while you and I saw an eval bar that kind of jumped up and said, hey, something's here, Anish Giri probably also got that, just a feeling, right? He just felt, okay, rook takes b4. That's not the move that I was expecting. Knight b4, bishop b4, more natural. And look at my opponent's king. King on e8, still in the center of the board. We've got bishop undeveloped on c8, rook still in the corner. White's pieces are fully mobilized, and they teach you in chess, Robert, when you've got all your pieces on their optimal squares, that's often when you start to look for the breakthrough.
And that pawn on b2 was useless. I understand that Pankratov's up a pawn now, but isn't he just going to get crushed down the e-file? I mean, if you take on e6, the d5 pawn is loose, so you can play bishop g5 after and move this knight. It feels like Anish is just thrilled to be in this position, and Pankratov, he still has the light shining on him, but it's not shining on his position, and he is in big trouble.
Yeah, there's some storm clouds overhead. I was going to say I expected maybe bishop to f4, but the way Pankratov is playing, it's as if he senses no danger. Like there's no danger radar at all. He's going for queenside pawn after queenside pawn. Meanwhile, the whole king side seems to be falling apart.
Yeah, he's attacking his pawn and defending d5, so it's a multi-purpose move. But there's a king on e8, and bishop d1, a simple move. Let's open up the... Why is Pankratov playing so quickly?
Yeah, it's an interesting strategy. I feel like he's already intuited that this position is lost, for lack of a better word. Like, I think he might feel that it's lost, and so what are you going to do spending 5 minutes in a pretty dead position? Are you really going to find the antidote all of a sudden, or should you just keep up the speed and at least then you're good on the clock should your opponent mess things up along the way?
Truly shocking stuff right now. The other game has started. It's following a similar trajectory as the first game between Duda and Serrano, but this game right now, this could be a match decider. There still will be a fourth game regardless, but with this king on e8 and Anish Giri ready to just claw at this king, bishop g5, trying to take and play bishop h5 check. I feel like there's so many options for white, and there's not a single threat that black has.
Yeah, that's the thing. Great point. Black's not doing anything, and black is so not doing anything here that I'm even considering moves like queen to c1. Like, just hit the rook and say, yeah, you've absolutely got nothing to do, by the way.
And white's not even down any material, right?
No.
Oh my
no
gosh.
material. You've just got everything you could ask for.
So knight f7 is black in a castle. Always funny when that happens.
I know, and I feel like there's so many players that just haven't quite gotten the full understanding of the rules of chess. Your rook is attacked, you can castle.
But you probably will get checkmated afterwards.
Hey, that's not part of the rules of chess. That's different.
just bring all the pieces to the party and we'll get a rook lift. This is what Anish wanted in game one.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. He's got his game with the white pieces. We know Anish, 2,800 level player, and he's got a position where he's on the attack, not down material. Look at how much time. He's got 10 minutes. He's basically probably got 5-6 good options here. He's got so many good options that he doesn't know which one to pick.
And he knows he's winning, right? You said Pavel likely feels it as well, but Anish doing the correct thing. He has so much time remaining. Even if he spends 5 minutes on this choice, as long as he finds the path forward, that is what's most important. He has plenty of time after that to fill out the rest of the game. So while we do have a moment here while Anish thinks, let's go to the game between Duda and Serrano. This could be the final game of that match if Duda were to win. And you see the eval bar plummet because we went from a winning position to one that's a little bit more normal.
Exactly. But I tell you, if you came and watched the last game between these two players, that eval bar was all the way to the top of the screen, not 10, 15 moves in. So I think Duda, for one, will be happier to have a more normal position here where, he's not running into prep in the opening. In fact, it's him that has sort of, he doesn't have that dangerous prep where you're going to blow your opponent off the board and win all of a sudden. But he does have prep, as in he has a specific structure and a specific type of opening and plan that he's going for. He executed it once, and that's where he got his win in this match. If he can do that again right here, let's not forget, Robert, this match can end on the spot.
Yes, and I think Duda wants that to happen because he sees from experience how dangerous Serrano is. He doesn't want to go to a next game and have to deal with some kind of crazy, wild opening theory. And here, with the white pieces, his pawn on e4 is under attack by two of black's pieces. The bishop on h3, why is it there? The last move was bishop h3 by Duda. And after queen c6, he goes bishop back to g2. So on one hand, you're like, what? You just wasted a turn. On the other, you're like, hey, you're a strong player because you're willing to admit that your bishop belongs on g2, cover that d5 square, protect e4. And sorry, what is black's plan exactly? The pawn a5 stops the b5 push. You take en passant, and d5. Give me that square. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and that's obviously a really advanced concept here. When you think about it, I've seen 1200s play bishop h3 and bishop back to g2. That's called wasting time. But at a really high level, sometimes you can do that when your opponent displaces their pieces and does so in an unfavorable way. So here, the queen on c6, it doesn't want to be on that square. After something jumps into d5, the queen's going to be attacked maybe by the pawn. So the queen is found herself on a square that's not ideal for the current position. And guess what? If black now plays queen back to c7, white says, okay, castle, I've got my bishop on g2, which is where I wanted it in the first place.
And you stole a tempo in the process. So I like it. I think Duda is playing cleverly, and there's no clear plan for Serrano. The only plan that you typically have in such a position is to push your pawn on the b file. But as soon as that pawn pushes, we take en passant. And this is not a winning situation, but knight a5 comes with tempo. Another benefit of having the queen out on c6 from white's perspective is now the queen has to move. And then you can just castle, maybe play queen d3 like he did in the first game. And white has good control.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, this is... but I think this is also the game that Duda wants. I don't remember exactly what happened to Serrano in the previous game, but he's no doubt looked at that, trying to learn from how that game went. And he's definitely got a much more interesting position for himself here. The bishop can get out to the e6 square. c4 is a target for black's pieces, and there's also very clear open files for the rooks. Rook b8, rook f to c8. And the b2 and c2 pawns come under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, he's something very clear to play for. I agree with you here. And it still says white should have a slight plus. The a6 pawn is a long-term weakness. The d6 pawn is backward. The d5 square still under white's control. So from that perspective, I think that Duda can be quite happy. I would probably start with queen d3, just like we were talking about with the queen on c6. If we drag the bishop to e6, now after knight d5, I don't know if you want to take with the bishop. You can. I take back. If you take with a knight, then when I take, I gain the tempo against your bishop, and I'm ready to castle. So this is a game of cat and mouse.
Yeah, very double-edged, certainly. As I guess that bishop, you might have been thinking similarly that bishop e6 also exposes the bishop to a move that white probably wants to get in anyway. Like, how natural is the move knight d5? So he says, look, I don't want to be on a square where I'm just going to get attacked next move, but I do need to develop this bishop in order to play rook b8, rook c8, as you highlighted.
But now he doesn't have knight c4. And you can play your rook over to c8, and that's great. But after knight c4, if we start trading pieces...
Interesting. So he goes all the way Because look, truly you do need a rook on the a file. The a6 pawn is weak, and you don't want to give it up for nothing. But I did expect rook to c8 to try to gain control of the c4 square. Now after rook b8, there's no knight c4. Honestly, for black here, the main idea or move that I'm looking at is actually knight g4 way on the other side of the board, because I don't know what else to do with black's position.
And rook fc1, I think we understand what Jan Chisov's going for. Is knight d5 was stopped because the b2 pawn was hanging. With the rook here, once the knight moves, thank you very much. Let's just push these pawns up the board. So I feel like Jan Chisov has a very good handle of the position. He will probably play bishop d2. There's no easy way to pile up more pressure on this pawn. You need your bishop to get out to c5. But unfortunately, there's a pawn on d6 in the way. And even still, the bishop can always drop back to e1 to defend. So the game is easier to play for JKD, and he's also up a point in the match.
Exactly. And actually,
you got to go to the other game. I'm sorry, Aman.
Let's do it.
Spicy.
JKD with a very, very firm grip on that position. But I tell you, one position that I'll tell you that Pankratov does not have a firm grip on is this one. This reminds me of the game between Serrano and Duda in the last round. Total madness here.
Isn't Giri up a pawn? Like, he's not down any material, and there's a threat of... Is that checkmate? It's checkmate at 1!
It's made. It's checkmate in a single move.
What was that game? And Pankratov hasn't even reacted. Now he moved
it's a different way, I think, of handling a dead loss position. I think there's a couple ways to do it. We saw Duda. He was in a position that was probably just as dead loss, Robert. And he tanked. He was upset visibly. And Pankratov is just kind of like, whatever. If I die, I die,
This is checkmate. The king is caught in the middle of the board. Can't go anywhere. What just we left for like a few minutes just to show the other game. And
crazy.
Knight d7. Whoa. What a move, by the way. Just opening up lines against this king. And Pankratov went knight d3. And he doesn't even play bishop takes with the pawn. So if bishop takes on f6, there's still bishop h5 check. And
maybe e7 as well.
Oh my gosh. Like, the king goes up here. I think the problem now is like you just go rook a1 and
e5 is loose. Yeah,
d5 is hanging. This is just miserable. So this happens, and rook a1 anyway, and he gets checkmate in the center of the board. Wow, this is as one-sided of a game as you could possibly see at this level.
You don't see mates just pop on the board, and it almost looked like a checkmate that neither player really noticed until it was there, and I was like, wait, is that mate in one?
Yeah, when the bar goes from plus a million to 1-0, the game is over. I can't even look at this game anymore. So Anish Giri wins it. He goes up 2-1, and Pankratov will get the white pieces. I don't know how he comes back from this one. This is a brutal game.
Yeah, that was a really, really good game by Giri. Take the white pieces, and he really just stuck it to Pankratov that entire game. So I thought he played tremendously, and now the pressure is back on Pankratov. But before we get to that, the pressure is actually on Alexei Serrano to stay in this tournament. He can't lose this game.
And he's in a bad position. The knight went back to d1. Knight retreats are often the hardest moves to play in chess. It covers f2. It allows c4, b4, and those pawns are just marching up the board, kicking black's pieces back. And what are your rooks doing exactly on a8 and b8?
That's right. Yeah, knight g4 was sort of a one-tempo move to try to take the bishop. But actually, I think the bishop is almost on greener pastures right now. Supporting b4 is so important. Once white gets the moves that you've highlighted here, b4 and c4, next move is h3. I think the advantage is overwhelming.
This is really bad for black. And Serrano, look at him. He doesn't look very happy. He's calculating. He will work hard, because if he holds this game, he does get another chance with the white pieces. But the way the match has been going, after a first-round loss, he almost gets the second-round win with great preparation. But as I was kind of indicating before, Aman, I feel like as a chess player, psychologically, you're even more harshly impacted when you should be winning after 15 moves. It's like I did everything I worked on at home, and then after that I played badly. So you start second guessing yourself.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Because he can't do that right now. You have to trust yourself with black. Also, knight g4, I mentioned that was kind of the only aggressive idea that I noticed for black. He's played it. And now that he's played it, yeah, Robert, I'm kind of out of ideas. So, like, what do you do as black? I see myself getting pushed back with b4, c4. Like, f5 is an idea, but the rook on a8, you never can play f5 in these positions. So I'm really unsure how to get things to work other than just to let white gain the space they're going to gain and just play a slightly worse position.
So what's even the defensive setup? Where do black's pieces belong? Do you just shuffle your king? I don't really know what to suggest.
Yeah. First of all, the knight on g4, it has to retreat. Like, it has to end up back on f6. I'm looking at the dark square bishops, and just because I need something to do, I'm looking at bishop g5 just as at least an idea, something to play for.
I like that move, actually. Bishop g5. The downside is d6 becomes tender, but on the plus side, this is a really bad bishop only defending that pawn. So
It ain't much. It's just, yeah, b4 still happens. The queen is going to have to retreat to c7. And I guess as black, like, I want to play bishop e6 and queen c7, and probably my knight on b6 needs to reroute. But look, I don't have a lot of space as black. I'm probably saying bishop g5 is my only idea.
I'm with you, actually. One thing that's coming to mind now is bishop g5. Oh, he plays bishop e6. But if we can get an analysis board and just show you a sample line, that bishop g5, b4, maybe there's queen d4. We saw Anish do something like this. And the point is, this b4 pawn will lose its defender if the dark square bishops are traded. So the pawn structure doesn't look ideal. And you may say, all right, I'll take it. I'll play e5. Yes, I get a tactic against this rook down here. Black's like, you sure you want to do that? Because when we get to this point, I will just take you on a8. And now I have these light squares to work with. The knight f3. This pawn is a target with a knight coming to d5. This is exactly what black wants, a chance to breathe and have some play of his own.
Yeah, that's a really cool line. And bishop e6 was played, so I'm not sure if bishop g5 was the best move in the position, but bishop e6, it just looks like the play is too easy, because now now h3 can happen, force the knight back to f6. There's no more bishop g5 stuff, and then c4. And once those two moves happen, I don't see anything.
Yeah, all I can do is shake my head, because then this knight, which retreated from c3, will go to e3 and into d5. So JKD's plan, so simple. And once this knight gets to d5, please take me. Because when I take with the c pawn, imagine a pawn here, then my knight gets into c6. So every single decision for Jan Krzysztof gains him something important. And every move that we see, it looks like Alexei has not moved in like 10 turns.
Yeah, exactly. His position looks identical. His position on camera looks identical. He just doesn't know what to do, because white's covering everything. It's just, I feel like white took some steps back, covered everything. And as soon as things were covered, all of a sudden it's like full offense. This feels like a classic counterattack, in a football match where, everybody's just running up the field, and all of a sudden b4, c4, h3, and the pieces are just getting kicked back for black here.
Yeah. This is just really nice stuff from Jan Krzysztof, and he's one of the best rapid players in the world, whether it's over the board or online. He's won some very prestigious events. He won the what's it called, the Oslo Esports Cup, if I'm getting the name correct, in the Champions Chess Tour. He won the Superbet over the board event in Poland. He's a force, and right now he's +3 in this position. Black's not even down material, but white is just making the most obvious moves.
Yeah, and Duda's not thinking too much about his moves here. b4, c4, king h2, knight e3. He knows what's necessary in the position on how to improve it. And honestly, he's doing nothing wrong right now. It would be a real shame for Duda not to convert this. But we have seen crazier in this match. That's all I'm going to say. If Serrana, as strong a player as he is, can somehow mess up that position, up a couple pieces, and deepen his very, very good prep, then don't count Serrana out of the event just yet.
But Serrano is playing Fischer random while Duda is playing chess. I mean, this is just really unfortunate for him. I've been in this position with the black pieces before. You're just getting squeezed from every direction. There's a knight on a5. There's a knight on d5. You don't have a single idea. I often say the side that controls the pawn breaks is the side with the advantage. Black has 0 pawn breaks to work with.
Yeah,
White can play f4. You want to throw that one in. You can play c5. You can choose your own adventure here, and black is just shuffling pieces around.
Yeah, speaking of your f4 move, I really like it. Sometimes in positions like this, I feel like, personally, I have this instinct to take too much time and sort of build it up really slowly, but oftentimes you miss your chances, and f4 could be one of those chances here. It looks really powerful.
Yeah, you can even throw an f5 to force black's hand to take on d5, and that will give white control of the c6 square. So black, Serrano, he wants to play a knight c6 type of idea. That's what he's going for. And Yanchislev Duda, he had one iffy game that I can remember in this event. He beat Guha 3-0 in the opening match. Then against Wang Hao in game 1, I think he was just like dead, it seemed. And he somehow survived that. And then he won game 2 when Wang Hao handed him a piece. Like just completely blundered. So Duda has not been in too much trouble in terms of an overall match. In game 2 of this match, of course, he was lost, objectively speaking, but he'd won game 1. So he just has this good style for matches, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. And even though that might not paint the full picture, look, if someone's getting in a tough game in every match, but also winning every match, 2.5, 3-0, like you can't just chalk it up to luck every single time. I mean, it's far from it. The resilience to stay in those games, and top players are not just going to be blundering those. Like, hang on a sec, how come they don't do that against me? Well, it's because I don't have the tenacious defense that Duda does.
It's a good point. And we've seen that from Andreikin. We see that from Hikaru Nakamura, perhaps better than anybody on the planet when he has a tough position. He knows how to set little traps, play quickly, get his opponent to time trouble. And the worst part for Serrano is he's the one down on the clock. He has no space whatsoever. Knight c6, I guess, but even that doesn't look very appealing.
Yeah, knight c6. In that position, I think I even want to consider f5 as an idea, or knight takes c6 and then f5. And, and I just love the resulting position.
Just give me more and more space. I thought you could just start pushing pawns down. And the advantage somehow slipped, but it still looks great for white. So f4, no response just yet. I mean, knight c6, what is the best reply here? Oh my gosh, it's that simple. Just take first and then f5. The bishop's trapped.
Oops.
Wait, did this just happen?
Yeah, that's an oops that I could say I'm guilty of, and unfortunately we have another perpetrator, Robert.
Well, you never want to take on f6, right? That's not something
it's weird. Exactly.
But now it works because the bishop's trapped.
Yeah. And
Serrano, look at him. He recognizes, he's like, wait, oh no.
And that's it. That's going to be the match. I mean, I can't imagine. The funny thing is, Serrano probably feels the same way Duda felt last game right now. He's got that, it's just dead lost. And to Duda's credit, somehow he stuck in there. I would just be impressed, though, if we could see the same out of Serrano here. He's going to lose that bishop, and it's got to be the game, you feel.
It's just not going to work out, obviously, but I think you take, and then once this pawn takes an e6, you take back with the pawn. He's at 6 and knight on d4, but he's going to be down a bishop for just one pawn. And everybody at home, he didn't take this bishop right away because the bishop was still trapped. He knew it was the best choice, but maybe there was some other move that was slightly better. Ultimately, he's like, give me that free piece. I like the fact that he didn't essentially pre-move.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you do want to cash in, of course, but there are other moves available. And if a piece is trapped, it's a really good principle to understand that you don't have to be in a rush to take it.
No. And for Serrano, you see the disappointment on his face. Even getting here, huge accomplishment. He beat Vidit Gujrathi and Shakir Mamedyarov. Those are two powerhouses in the chess world. His time at the CGC is about to come to an end. He is not going to make it to Toronto, but he will leave with $15,000, and honestly, some great match victories.
Yeah, that's a lot to be proud of for sure. But let me just tell you that he's thinking about none of that right now, as he's wallowing in the fact that this position is hopeless and he will very likely be knocked out as another pawn gets picked up by Duda. So much to be proud of for Serrana, but I think, we are our own worst critic. And right now he's only thinking about that blunder a couple moves ago.
I just feel for him. That's what I'm thinking about here is just you see it on his face, how well he's played throughout the global championship thus far. And his time in the event is coming to an end as Duda just played a great day of chess. And you will say, well, game 2 wasn't so great. No, it actually showed something great. Greatness doesn't come from just winning games and crushing people. It also is shown in moments like that where your back's against the wall and you still have the fortitude to survive. And he's earned his spot into Toronto. I don't think he is going to let this game slip. I know there are commentators' curses, but come on, Aman. You can't possibly jinx this position.
We're not that much of bad luck, are we, Robert? Surely not. No, I can't see it happening, especially just how much time is on the clock and the imbalance right now. It isn't even the case that they're both down to 30 seconds or that one side is ahead of the other. No, it's actually JKD who's up a piece and up time. So he seems to have all the trump cards right now.
He's doing great. And he's still locked in, even though he knows that this match should be over. He's not rushing. He's not just moving pieces that he thinks will just be good. He's calculating, and that's a really important. Look at that move. E5, a pawn sacrifice to bring the queen in here, attacking this pawn, opening up the bishop. He's going for checkmating attacks. He's trying to push his B pawn, and that was the best decision.
Yeah, that's incredible. Like, I'm even sitting here just admiring what just happened, because I probably would have played rook b1 and tried to push my b pawn, whereas this conversion is just so much more pure. This is exactly what the engine wants. This is the most lethal way to convert things.
And I'd like to move rook f1, offering a trade, trying to bring the rook into the game if the rook avoids that trade. And he is up a piece for 0 pawn, so a full piece at this point. And going after the black king should be very swift.
Yeah, and I'm sure he's considering moves like bishop takes h6 here. They are actually playable, but I agree. Keep it simple. Rook f1, trade things like that if you get the rooks off the board, queen e8 and bishop d3 is game.
Oof, rook b8, just keeping the rooks on because you need some hope. And your bishop h6 idea, Aman, looks very powerful. Rook f7 first. How can you complain about that? Bishop h6 to follow.
Yeah, I think bishop h6 will be most likely the next move. Very difficult to see anything wrong with that.
There's only one check in the position, and it's a sacrifice that doesn't give you a next check. So bishop takes h6 is certainly a great move. And for Duda, he doesn't need to get fancy. He could make other moves as well, obviously.
Yeah.
Bishop d5 looks pretty good, just trying to go after the king.
Yep.
Queen f5 just to trade rooks. But bishop h6.
Agreed.
Duda style.
Agreed. So many ways here where, there's no point in speculating about which one or this one's better than that. No, it's very much just stylistic. And wow, on the board, rook e7 and GG, a win for Duda, Robert.
Huge win for him and a great accomplishment in his young but already very successful career. Jan Krzysztof Duda books a ticket for Toronto, Canada, coming this November in just under a month. He is the winner of his group, so congratulations are in order for him. He's actually struggled a bit, Aman, in over-the-board chess. His Olympiad was not successful after a poor showing in his maiden candidates. But Jan Krzysztof Duda will be there in the top 8 in Toronto.
He will, as we see him qualifying out of Group B. What a group to qualify out of, as you see the caliber of names that you have in Group B there. But on to Toronto is Duda. What an amazing match. As you said, it's I really liked what you said earlier about how it's not just about wins. You have players that can get wins, and when they're having a bad game, you might say, oh, well, that match wasn't clean. It was back and forth. but it showed great qualities as well. Not only can they win, but they can defend the tough positions. A position where you should get 0 points, they get half a point. And that's what makes these champions in tournaments like this.
And speaking of half point, Duda only dropped 2 separate half points. He beat Wang Hao 2.5 half. He beat Alexei Serrano 2.5 half. So his overall score is through the roof. His chess.com rapid rating is sky high, maybe number 1 on the site. I'll have to check on that. But Jan Krzysztof Duda is not going to back down from any fight, and he's going to have to get a flight to Toronto, and we'll be excited to see him there. And, well, this event would not be possible without Brave, so we want to give a shout-out to our presenting sponsor. Brave means private browsing and so much more. By default, Brave blocks ads and trackers on every page and video you visit, even on YouTube. No ads means up to 3 times faster page loads, faster streaming, and faster playback. It means 35% longer battery life while saving on mobile data and internet bandwidth. For Android, iOS, and desktop, get the best browser for gamers, streamers, and creators. Switch in 60 seconds at brave.com/chess. Jan Krzysztof Duda is through to the round of 8 in Toronto. Will Anish Giri join him? That remains to be seen here at the Chess.com Global Championship, presented by Brave. We'll be right back.
I was 15 years old when Karpov and Kasparov played their first World Championship match. And I was 21 years old, and they had still not finished playing each other. They had one of these remarkable rivalries, and by matches which dwarfed the lengths of modern matches.
Growing up and watching Kasparov dominate the chess world is something I still remember vividly because, of course, for every young chess player, I don't think there was a single one on the planet who didn't idolize everything that he was.
Gary's 2 years older than me. Honestly speaking, there is a difference in class. And, you know, I'm a good player at my best. I was a very good player, but he was on a level higher than that.
Open to anyone, all around the world.
Oh!
The Chess.com Global Championship offers the dream of playing against the best.
We are in for a wild ride.
And hey, have we mentioned there's also $1 million at stake?
The total pot is $1 million.
No, that is not a typo. The prizes are unbelievably generous.
The CGC knockout phase has hit crunch time. We began with thousands of players, now only a handful remain.
131 moves is what it took for Wesley So to make it to Toronto on an unbelievable defensive effort, Aman.
No matter who you are, things are about to get very, very real.
It's a huge collapse from Caruana.
It all went downhill. And Dmitry Andreikin punches his ticket to the round of 8 in unreal fashion.
At stake, a trip to the finals in Toronto and a clean shot at the largest first place prize of the year.
E6 was winning!
My friends, it's the CGC round of 16. Who's headed to Toronto? It's time to find out.
The last man in that video, Jan Krzysztof Duda, just clinched his spot in the top 8. Will Anish Giri join him? That is the question that we have. I'm Grandmaster Robert Hess alongside my friend Grandmaster Aman Hamilton. Aman, Duda, very impressive. Anish Giri, very impressive in game 3. Do we think Pavel Pankratov can bounce back in game 4?
Well, you know what? In this competition, Robert, I don't think that Pavel has gone out without a fight ever. You know, he's been down, he's been up against these top players. So I'm going to say yes, absolutely. Don't count him out of this match. Pavel now gets the white pieces in game 4. Yes, he's down a point, but look at that bracket. It's all about making it to the next stage, and Pankratov has made it this far. Don't think he's going to roll over just because he's down 1 point to Giri here. Giri has to be very mindful of the fact that Pankratov is going all out. He's got nothing to lose, and he's got the white pieces. So I think we're going to see a big push from Pavel here in game number 4.
And Pavel beat Nurbek Abdusattorov in a must-win game with the black pieces just to make it to that Armageddon. So you're right that Pavel has trailed, and he has still made his way through to this stage. But Anish Giri is one of the best prepared players, one of the most solid players on the planet. I don't really see him losing.
Yeah, what I do wonder, though, is what we're going to get out of the opening. Like, are we going to see more weird shenanigans with G6, E6, C5? Because it looked like Giri couldn't decide on an opening, so he picked 4 last time. Like, what's he going to do this time when it's clear that the match situation is different?
Wow, an E4 by Pankratov, not D4 this time, and we get a Sicilian. Not a real surprise because Anish Giri has made courses on the Najdorf, but in a game where a draw is sufficient, playing a Najdorf, maybe some risk to that.
Definitely. Yeah, at this point, obviously shades of the other match coming in here as, wow, the players are blitzing out. And I was going to say, if you're going into an open Sicilian against Anish Giri, you better know your openings.
Yeah, because normally you study a Super GM's course. Unfortunately, you're studying Anish Giri's course. So you're using Anish's prep against him, and maybe, just maybe, he didn't give every last detail there. But no matter... Rook A4? Just greedy chess?
Interesting. Because, yeah, he's fully committed to winning this pawn, it looks like.
And I see one game in the Explorer with B3 played, and maybe Pankratov... No, I was about to say maybe he knows the opening better, and then Anish plays Rook B5, which is not a move you play this quickly unless you've studied the position.
Right, because Rook B5 immediately targets the D5 pawn, and Bishop B4 here, Robert, stands out because, look, this move is a way to guard the pawn on D5 with the queen, right? So Bishop B4 immediately sticks out, but Black has some immediate reactions. First of all, Knight C5 attacks the rook and would then probably force the bishop to take. And losing that dark square bishop this early is often enough compensation. And that's not to mention that Bishop B7 comes with tempo attacking the D pawn.
It feels like White has played about 7 moves and Black has played 15 because Black has castled, has more pieces developed. Bishop takes B4 was the choice. And now Anish has to figure King H8. Okay, this is Anish Giri preparation.
For sure. And I was also going to point out, like, just to extend your thought, White's pieces have all moved like 3 times to get where they, you know what I mean? Like Knight F3, Knight D2, Knight C4, Bishop E3, Bishop D2, Bishop B4. And you think about how the moves have been made from Anish, it's very deliberate. You know, every piece moved once. So that's why it feels like he's way ahead. And guess what? You called it. King H8, best move in the position. Yeah, I'm sniffing out Anish Giri preparation at the moment.
King H8, and now Pankratov's on the clock. So he prepared up to this point, and now he's like, all right, now I'm on my own. I'm playing one of the best Najdorf players on the planet. Bishop takes D6 is played. Now, Anish has a few choices. He can take on D6 because that distracts the knight. The B2 pawn and the A5 pawns are loose. He could probably play a move like Bishop to B7, going straight after this D5 pawn. To my eyes, that looks great. And why this king is on H8 is there will never be a pin along the A2 G8 diagonal.
And allowing that pawn to just hang, that's the reason why I think you were immediately like, yeah, this is preparation. Because how do you drop a pawn and then just calmly make a king move, seemingly dropping another pawn? I'm not sure if Pankratov is doing this because of the match situation, but I think it's probably the right strategy. I know that it sucks, that feeling when you're going into your opponent's prep, but hey, there's no immediate reason why you can just look at this position and say, yeah, this is bad for White. At the moment, if you're Pankratov, you're in a must-win game. You're currently up 2 pawns. It's like, hey, prove it.
Yeah. And I like the featured chat we had before that said this is essentially an Armageddon game for Pankratov without time odds. So he's been great in Armageddon with the white pieces. He has the white pieces here, but Anish Giri has all 15 minutes to start the game. So knight c4 back, I think rook b5 back makes perfect sense. Just keep an eye on these pawns,
Right.
but white is up a pawn for the time being.
That's right. And I think that might change. So if you play bishop e2, right, and just want to get developed, I'm looking at bishop to b7 and pawn to d6. I think you take on g2.
Why not? One rook on g1 is not going to lead to checkmate. There will be a passed pawn, and that's frustrating. But look at the rook on a4. Pieces are all over the place for white. It's like you kind of throw pieces up in the air, and some land on various squares.
Yeah. And I guess black's pieces landed on nicer squares than white's because it looks a little disorganized right now. Bishop b7, definitely the move I'm considering. But also, don't count out moves like knight c5, knight f6 even puts pressure on the d pawn, and we just want rook to d5, whether it captures a pawn or not.
And you see the players, similar poses right now, hands on head. And I know that Anish has been taking this event very seriously. And you may think he won his first 2 matches. He beat Raunik. That was a wonderful match. I still think the best of the entire event so far. But you may think, he's playing the 7th seed. He's playing someone lower rated. Like, he should breeze through. He's been taking this whole event super seriously. And with the position he has now, Aman, he's looking like he's in great shape to join Jan Krzysztof Duda, Hikaru Nakamura, Andreykin, Levan Aronian, and Wesley So in Toronto.
100%. Like you called it, this is such an important match for honestly both of these players. But I love what you said, and I echoed it in previous commentary as well about Anish clearly taking this event seriously. We've seen players bring out preparation that they might have been saving for years, and they're bringing it out on the biggest stage here, the Chess.com Global Championship. That just shows how seriously the players are taking the event and what's at stake here.
For sure. And Anish was nervous heading into that first match against Ju Wenjun, a very strong player. He did win that match, and he continues to keep pressing on in them. But yeah, he is not taking a single move lightly. And right now, he shouldn't. Look at the position. It's even material. Black actually has the better pawn structure in the center of the board, but this pawn on a6, that could be a problematic piece. Once this knight moves out the way from c4, a6 could drop, and you certainly don't want to allow white to have an outside pass pawn.
Yeah, and I just don't see enough in this position. The more I look at it, it's like Giri has achieved everything out of the opening. He's even time. He hasn't spent, excessive amounts of time trying to figure things out. No, he clearly had this, in his pocket. He's just double checking things. So now his prep is clearly ended, but this is how you end preparation, right? With a great position where you know the plans, got a better structure. There's nothing to complain about if you're an Anish Giri fan.
Beautiful position. And I'm trying to figure out what the plan of action is for Anish, because you want to ask yourself, do I want to trade pieces? A bishop b5 type of move. Do I want to go forward? I have an extra pawn if we cut the board in half. Let's cut it at the d file. White has a passed c pawn. Black has an extra e pawn. And so do I want to start pushing these pawns and go for an attack of my own? I see the merit in that.
Yeah, I could see it going either way. One thing is that I would say based on the match situation, I don't think you'd go that crazy, e4, f4, f3, although it looks scary. I think that you just want to maybe trade pieces and neutralize the position here. So curious to see what he does, because I think the strongest players have an ability to make aggressive attacking moves that don't fully commit to an attack, right? You won't see moves like g5 just appear on the board here because it's such a committal move. I see that move. I'm saying, okay, I know you're going all out on the attack now. And there's also weaknesses that are developing as the move f4 gets played, Robert. This is a more conventional attacking move, but it's definitely going to make the position double-edged. As Pankratov, I got to be honest, I'd be happy to see this.
Yeah, you need to play for a win, even if it costs you the full point, because a draw and a loss are the same. But I do love what you just said, Aman, that for these top-level players, when they go forward, they don't also compromise their underlying structure of their position. F4 is a very nice move, and rook d1 was maybe not the best reply, it would appear. And is there a queen g5? Is there going to be a checkmate threat here? F4 takes away the g3 square from this rook. So it looks like there could be a big attack brewing.
Yeah, something as simple as queen g5 right away. Now, you might think about rook takes d1 first, and then queen over to g5. So that's another option. There is bishop f3 there, but I still think that's really, really dangerous.
Yeah, options for black queen g5 by Anish. You could tell he's feeling it. He's spending his time. He's doing so wisely, but he just has a great sense of the position. He feels the pulse of it. And the rook can join the party in a second, but there's already a checkmate threat. So if white plays g3, that looks very troublesome with the opening of the diagonal. But what else are you going to do? Bishop f1? You're just backtracking, and black can keep going forward.
Exactly. Bishop f1 does take care of things at home, but it doesn't do anything to stop the onslaught of pawns here. The pawn on f4 for me, hero pawn. It's stopping knight e3. It's stopping rook g3. Both of those are extremely good defensive moves. So that pawn right now is kind of dictating the entire pace of the game.
What a position for Anish Giri. And he continues to spend some time trying to figure it out. I like the look of e4. I don't see the drawback. f4 is defended by the rook and the queen over here. It also opens up the 5th rank. Maybe an eventual queen c5 could be annoying. So what exactly does white have going on for him?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the main idea for white has to revolve around that a6 pawn. It's so tough to get a hold of because you need your bishop to defend checkmate of all things on g2. But white has a dangerous a pawn if that a6 pawn can ever be taken. So Anish just has to make sure while he's launching an attack that he's not forgetting about his queenside altogether.
And Anish just sank in his chair a little bit. He's getting closer and closer to his computer screen. He cannot afford to lose that pawn, that's for sure. It doesn't mean he needs to bring his knight out just yet, but he is trying to figure a way, how do I not just neutralize my opponent's plan? Because that's the mistake a lot of players make when they're like, I need a draw. Let me just play for a draw.
Right.
Oftentimes, the best way to secure a draw is just by playing good moves. You're not taking any risks thus far. So e4 looks like it just continues in the style that Anish has shown.
And how many matches have you seen, and maybe the chat will remember some, where in that 4th and final game when one player needs a win, it's actually the other player that gets a winning position, and then what happens? Maybe a draw offer, or maybe a repetition, because that's how you secure a win, is get it from a position of strength. That'd make your life way easier. So I totally agree. You don't want to just sit here, try to trade everything, because in fact, if you do that, you could be letting your opponent off the hook and not being objective. And I think when you lose your objectivity in chess, that's when you start to miscalculate and eventually make a mistake that you regret.
For sure. And Pankratov, look at him. He's leaning back, just trying to find any ounce of energy so he can take the chance that he needs to win this game. But there are not enough pieces remaining. I feel like the position isn't particularly complex. The a6 pawn, we've acknowledged, is a problem. But besides that, you typically need multiple weaknesses to secure any sort of winning chances.
Right. And look, I also was thinking, honestly, about even like h6 or h5. Just taking a moment to make space for the king. Yeah, it also might function as an aggressive move too. But rook c5 played by Anish is like, well, he obviously wants the bishop to, shine on the g2 pawn from c6. And yes, there's, e4, f3 ideas, but take into account the other benefits for white now. The rook on d1 can exert all the pressure on the open file. Rook takes c4 is a threat here, but it's white to move. So I think you can just get out of danger with either knight d6 or knight b6.
Yeah, bring that knight up and don't blunder rook takes c4. So Aman mentioned it. The g2 pawn needs the bishop's defense. If the bishop had to take back, you would get mated down here. And there is no bishop takes g2 threat. That looks like a threat. I'm just going to put the moves on the board. Bishop g2, bishop g2, f3. Yes, I win the game. There's a pin here. I'm going to checkmate you. Then you realize that pawn was pinned and your queen is hanging. So you can't lose sight of the position. Rook h3 was the choice of Pankratov. And
Didn't he lose sight of the position?
excuse me? Rook takes c4, resigns?
Pankratov has played this match in a really strange way. I felt like in the last game when he got that worst position that he was just chucking moves out. And yeah, I mean, sadly, I think we're going to see perhaps, Robert, his exit from the tournament in a bit of an underwhelming way.
Yeah, this isn't the same Pavel that played the first 2 games of this match, as well as the first 2 matches overall. I mean, he was a force to be reckoned with. He beat Vishy Anand, Nordibek Abdusattorov. Nordibek was a popular pick out of this group, beating Anish Giri. But Anish, he still remains concentrated, even though his opponent blundered a piece. And that is why he is going to be traveling from the Netherlands to Canada.
Yeah, he knows that the game's not over until it's over. And honestly, whatever the evaluation is here, I promise you it was probably higher in the Serrana and Duda game that we did not see converted. So anything can happen. And I mean, you can see hands on his head. He's still calculating here because guess what? Until that ticket is punched, Robert, he's not celebrating.
Right? His name is not on that flight seat just yet. But look at this feature chat here. Anish is one guy you cannot win against in a must-win game. And that's a draw joke, but I think in all seriousness, he is incredibly solid, has great preparation. We saw it in this very game. He was a little bit better prepared than Pankratov was. Pavel could not get an advantage, and now he simply blundered a piece. So Pavel, he knows this one's over. You're speaking truth, Aman, that Serrana spoiled a bigger advantage, at least on the eval bar, but this position is much clearer.
Yeah. I definitely agree there. And Rook G3 is a cute move, right? In fact, it's using the exact trick that you mentioned earlier, was that you got that pin. But Robert, I think you'll agree at this point, yes, the rook on c4 is hanging, but the problem is when the queen moves, your rook will be hanging as well on g3.
Exactly. So queen moves. Thank you for your rook. Well, thank you as well. It's nice to do business with you, and that should scoop up enough material for Anish to just move on here. And Pankratov, I feel for him. I mean, he earned so much respect from fans who had no idea who he was, and now they'll remember, wait, Pankratov, that's that guy who made it to the round of 16, and he beat Vishy, he beat Nordibek. It just wasn't his day. And you cannot have an off move, let alone an off day, against a super GM.
No, you can't. And is so punishing, so unforgiving, especially the knockout format. And Anish just brings the queen back to relative safety, just somewhere where it protects everything. And with a pair of hanging rooks on the board, it will be an extra piece for Anish. And with everything that's on the line here, I don't think Anish is going to have any problem converting this one.
Anish spent over 1 minute on that move. So this, for everybody watching, is what you should do in your own games. Don't just play quickly when you're ahead. Do like Anish Giri, win your games. And that is a ticket booked. Final score, 3-1 in Anish Giri's favor. The Dutch #1, the top 10 player in the world, everybody's favorite troll on Twitter, has made his way through to Toronto.
Amazing. He's a lot more than a Twitter troll, although I think he's a grandmaster there as well. Really impressive, I think, match overall. Yes, I think the first couple games went the way that Pankratov was looking for, but Giri also didn't do anything wrong either, right? Good games, played well. I mean, you just can't find those wins that easily. So he sussed things out. I think he had some interesting openings and preparation. He had a few chances, couldn't put them away, but in game 3, Robert, he came through with just a brilliant game to gain the advantage and ultimately put the pressure on Pavel in game number 4, where he was up 2-1 and his opponent needed to play a little bit more loose.
Yeah, and Pavel, you could argue, did some of the work for Anish by taking down Vishy and Nordibek, but
that's right.
Anish got through June. It was a bit of a shaky match. He wasn't as convincing as he became, but beating Raunik Sedwani the way he did, I've already said this so many times, like a broken record. You beat Raunik in that manner. Nobody does that, but Giri did, and he continued that into today's action.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see the Group F bracket there. Anish Giri, the top seed in that bracket, comes out as the qualifier to the top 8 will be going to Toronto. That's November 2nd to 7th. So that'll be really, really exciting. But again, just because Pankratov is maybe not as highly seeded or highly rated as some of the other players, you might think, oh, Giri's path is so easy. Well, newsflash, if he can beat Anand and beat Abdusattorov, like, not only does he deserve to be there, but he's a very, very worthy competitor. And I'm sure Anish went into this match feeling a little bit nervous about how unpredictable and just how strong his opponent was.
Yeah, he was nervous because he cared, but not because he was scared. No fear for Anish Giri. And, well, with that, we head on into our brave move of the day, because Anish Giri, he fears nobody on the chessboard. And in this position, Aman, it looked like Pavel didn't have the best grasp of the opening. He played rook takes b4, and that gave Anish the time he needed to pounce.
Yeah, I think the light bulb was all of a sudden going off in Anish's head. As in this position, I think rook b4 was not the anticipated capture. Knight takes pawn, bishop takes pawn on b4. Those were the moves he was considering, and probably the better option for Pavel Pankratov. But rook takes b4 played, and Giri sniffed something out, and he went forward here, Robert, with a very impressive move. And I think this was the difference in the match. The move f5, it's basically a knockout blow. The rooks on e1 and f1, they're fiending for some open lines. Once you give them open lines, Robert, the attack just plays itself.
It certainly does. d5 is loose. That pawn e6 is essential. A pawn chain is only as strong as its base pawn. You would love to have another pawn on f7. Sorry, no can do. So after rook takes b2, we had a greedy Pavel, but fe6, and not even bishop takes e6 here. That could have been played, but the attack rages on after the move bishop g5. You just get your pieces out of the way. Maybe knight c6 first, and then bishop g5. But there's problem down the e file. There's a problem on d5. If you castle, I think you see exactly where the problems are, because they're bishop f6.
Ooh.
Uh-oh, there goes your queen.
Beautiful.
You get a pin and win, or you get a discovery and win. Either way, the queen is lost. So Aman, after fe6, not even taking back on e6, it just felt like Pavel made Anish's life as easy as possible.
Indeed, yeah, he continued. He didn't take it back, and I think the next move to highlight is just how Anish continued with knight d7 here. Right, that move, it forces black to capture, because guess what? While you can castle after knight f7, you can't castle after knight d7. Now the f8 square is covered. There's no castling, and if you take on d7 with any piece, look at the open lines that result, and guess what? There's no surviving this position here, Robert. The bishop pair is raging, the rooks are on open lines, and black has so many pieces on the queen side committed nowhere and not defending the king. So a truly amazing continuation, and what a way to rip open the position by Anish.
And what a checkmate he earned himself, because rook a1, bring the rook away from the center. It's done its job attacking the queen. The queen is needed to protect d5. And so there goes that pawn, and there goes the game with bishop a5 check and mate.
Wow.
What a bishop pair on the 5th rank on both rook file. That's mate.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. That is a really rare checkmate as well. You've got the knight in the middle, 2 bishops on either side. That's just everybody working, and just such harmony in the pieces here, and the coordination by Anish. So tremendous way to open up the game. F5 is just a gorgeous, gorgeous move. And Robert, we had to highlight that.
We certainly did, and that was our brave move of the day by Anish Giri. We want to thank our presenting sponsors, Brave, for making the CGC happen here, and they will be with us through the live finals in Toronto. And today's final scores were Anish Giri with that great move and win 3-1 over Pavel Pankratov, and Vyacheslav Duda. I mean, he just outpaced Alexis Serrano, but the score is a bit misleading.
Totally. The people who watched today's action will be fully aware that that match was a lot closer than it was. However, Robert, when you look at this bracket here in the Chess.com Global Championship, you'll see the name Duda moving on, and ultimately, that's all that matters. Duda has punched his ticket to the live finals in Toronto, November 2nd. It gets underway. The matchups are also confirmed, as we see he moves on to face Hikaru Nakamura, which, I mean, obviously an insanely tough matchup, but Duda has absolutely been dispatching of his previous opponents.
Right, and this will be a great matchup of 2 well-prepared players, and 2 players who claw back. They steal a draw or victory from the jaws of defeat, because Hikaru beating him, I mean, not many people know how to do that. And for Duda, we just saw it right here today, that even when it's +8, his king is on F6, all sorts of problems, he still finds a way. And so he is going to face off against Hikaru in Toronto. The other side of things, Anish Giri doesn't know who he's going to face. Levon Aronian the same, because next Wednesday, a week from today, Amon, we have 2 absolutely brilliant matchups.
Yeah, this is going to be so exciting for so many reasons, Robert. Obviously, I think everyone wants to know, what are the final matchups going to be? Who are going to be the 8 players that play in Toronto? And of course, this is how we get to know the answer to that. So you've got that storyline, but also you've got players that are so competitive here. Ding Liren and Nihal Sarin is such an interesting matchup. I'm so excited for that one. And then meanwhile, you've got Jan Nepomniachtchi and Timur Rajabov. Timur was, so candid in his interview as well. I think he's really surging in chess lately, and Jan pretty much needs no introduction. It's been his year. It's been his couple of years as he's been putting up good result after good result.
Yeah, we have the World Chess Championship contestants in Ding Liren and Jan Nepomniachtchi, and then we have one of the young guard in Nihal Sarin, one of those upstarts, obviously a superstar in his own right, made the semifinals of the Speed Chess Championship a year ago. And then Timur Rajabov, who was cast aside, written off. And then he said, what was that? I'm going to crush the second half of the candidates. Then I'm going to beat your other hopeful from India, the teenager Arjun Erigaisi. Now, why not? Can he beat Jan Nepomniachtchi? Remains to be seen. But Aman, he's been playing some great chess in recent months.
He has. Put that date on your calendar. Next Wednesday, October 12th. Don't forget it. And another date to put in your calendar, Robert, is obviously the live finals in Toronto, right? November 2nd will be so exciting once we know who the 8 players are that will be competing for that first place $200,000 prize.
Big money at stake. And so you will not want to miss next week's action. And you'll also not want to miss what is coming out just today. So if you've been loving our CGC coverage and you don't want the chess to end after today's broadcast, head right over to go.chess.com/street to check out our brand new Street Chess episode, New Orleans. We're used to seeing professional chess played at the highest level on our screens, but the Street Chess series explores the beauty of the game and the communities it creates on a personal level. New Orleans episodes drops today on our YouTube channel, so be sure to subscribe and follow the series as we continue to explore street chess communities in some of the world's biggest cities. If you're on YouTube right now, we'll be rating the premiere of the episode. Don't go anywhere. Go watch. Enjoy the rest of your day and more from the Chess.com Global Championship presented by Brave next week when the round of 16 concludes.